Since uploading this video ranking every single anime I've ever seen, I got the impression that it wasn't really all too digestible for most people. I can imagine why. So I thought it'd be a good idea to cut it up and upload my top 60 anime as a completely separate video. I'm really proud of how this turned out. Hope you guys enjoy. If I were pressured under gunpoint to name anime's greatest mistake, I would probably say X-Arm. But this is a lie. X-Arm is peak fiction, alright? I'm tired of pretending it's not. The true answer to this question is Fate. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, which one? Well, thanks for asking. Nathan, all of them. I mean all of them. You see this guy? This guy is actually Satan. He tempts you into his world with some actual gourmet cuisine. But then while you're eating, he shuts the door behind you, takes the plate away, and says, if you ever want to taste something like this ever again, you're going to have to go out of your way to sample every single brand of dog food ever made. So then that's exactly what you set out to do. You stop at nothing to experience that taste again. OVAs, spin-offs, alternative timelines, reimaginings, visual novels, fucking porn. But at the end of the day, dog food was all there was. You finished that gourmet cuisine a long time ago. And then one day, as you're scrolling through the app store, you spot something. What you're seeing right now is a Fate fan's purgatory. You're already dead at this point. But let's rewind a little bit and try to savor that cuisine while we can. Fate Zero was a show that on the surface of things may seem like the least inspired anime to ever exist, because it genuinely does a fusion dance between two genres which literally market themselves on the fact that they're generic. Battle Royale and Isekai, but appearances often deceive. Right off the bat, I just want to say that the whole concept of the show is just so damn cool, I can't even get over it. The show is about a bunch of mages and noble families who participate in this thing called the Holy Grail War, which is like this battle royale for the ultimate prize of receiving any one wish. Although it's not actually any of the mages competing in this battle royale. Every single competitor is required to summon a figure from the past to fight for them. So like for example, one of the main characters summons King Arthur, but like the anime version. Another dude summons Alexander the Great, and then the most cold character in the entire show, Gilgamesh, gets summoned. It's a 10 out of 10 concept, but definitely runs the risk of having 0 out of 10 execution. But no, all these characters have amazing writing. Obviously, they're not going to be by the book historically accurate, but the show truly captures the essence of every legend summoned to the mortal realm. The fights are amazing. The show looks absolutely stunning. I mean, this is Ufotable before Demon Slayer. And I'm so glad that the Fate franchise was able to produce something so amazing and nothing else after this. Out of all the anime to ever come out, I've never seen one with more balls than Baccano. But before we talk about Baccano, we have to talk about my favorite movie. Pulp Fiction is probably something you've heard of. I mean, I feel like dick riding this movie is like the rite of passage for film video essays, for good reason. This movie has some of the toughest moments in cinema, like that one scene where Samuel L. Jackson recites a Bible verse and then proceeds to cap this guy in the head. But I think the real reason this movie is truly a generational film is because of its structure. Over the course of the film, we followed the stories of 4 different main characters, and the spectacular thing is that it somehow maintains a consistent narrative while constantly shifting between time periods, physical location, and perspective. And so what strikes me as the craziest part of this anime is that I looked at Pulp Fiction and said, I have crippling ADHD and possibly autism too, but I'm gonna attempt to replicate this anyways. If this anime were checked by a doctor, that doctor would prescribe it Adderall. To put this into perspective, this short single core anime has over 20 main characters. That's more protagonists in this thing than episodes in the show. And right up until the end, the show constantly cuts between 4 completely distinct time periods, which are used to build and give context to the main time period. If you look at Baccano's story from the perspective of someone who's finished it, it's actually a fairly linear and logical progression. And that's why the decision to chop up the story into bits and feed us only the parts they want us to see is such a genius idea. Without ADHD, the show wouldn't build tension as effectively, keep its mysteries as well, or just straight up wouldn't be as interesting. Oh yeah, I should probably describe what this show's about. Okay, so imagine an immortal version of The Sopranos meets slightly more sadistic Patrick Bateman, all while 2 clowns are dancing in the foreground. Yeah, lock in on this show. And then we start to talk about the most important 90 minutes in the history of anime, Akira. In the 1980s, anime was still kind of finding itself. Nowadays, you could randomize works created by Production IG, and whichever one it lands on, you could easily identify it as anime, because, well, it just feels like anime. For the past couple of decades, anime studios learned how to pander to anime fans, which is how I could easily say that this is an anime and this isn't. But back 4 decades ago, studios were way less worried about appealing to a certain audience and more focused on just creating the stuff that they wanted to create. Wicked City is something I hopefully will never watch, but I know enough about it to say that it can never come out today. And the same could also be said about Akira. From the collaboration of 7 different studios, Akira's existence is truly a mystery. It has almost 2 times the frame rate of the average anime at the time, which allowed it to stand visually at the same level as the likes of Walt Disney. It was directed by the same guy who wrote the manga, Akira, which is just downright strange. Like, I genuinely can't think of any other example where this happened. And the movie is set in Neo-Tokyo, which is this futuristic cyberpunk dystopia that was meant to be a replacement to the actual Tokyo, which was blown up. A lot of people suspect that, much like a lot of Japanese media around the same time, that this was a piece of fiction that came about from coping with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which makes sense. Our main characters, Kaneda and Tetsuo, both lost their parents during the destruction of the original Tokyo, which explains their delinquent behavior and the reason they're a part of a dangerous law-breaking biker gang. It's only when Tetsuo discovers his latent psychic ability that he truly begins to wreak havoc. This movie was truly a great watch, and honestly one of my favorite aspects of it was just how stylized everything was. I've had this Akira poster hanging up in my room for the past year, and it's honestly the coolest poster art to ever poster art. Baki the Grappler is a modern masterpiece, and I'm tired of pretending it's not. Sometimes you just need a show that's infused with pure testosterone to watch at the gym. You know, it's as Confucius always said, there's 2 pipelines to masculinity, the Anjute alpha male or the Baki enjoyer. And my choice was a simple one. This is the least gay Baki scene, by the way. And you might be asking right about now, but Kimbo, what is Baki even about? Are you seriously gonna compare it to real masterpieces like Fullmetal Alchemist when the entire show is literally just a shitpost? Hey, listen up. Does Elon Musk get diddled in Fullmetal Alchemist? No? Yeah, I didn't think so. Baki is the ultimate power scaling male fantasy. Like, it's cool when DBZ does it with all the different hair colors. Psych! That's for Democrats. Real power scaling is when muscles get bigger and body shapes become even more unthinkable than they already are. Now, but real talk, to me there's 2 reasons to watch Baki. One is because it's cool to see these 7-foot nukes in human form just battle it out. And the second reason is that this shit is funny as fuck. It's been a while since I've laughed so hard watching something like this. Yeah, Baki is absurd, but it's absurd in the most laughably self-aware way possible. And no, I'm still not going to explain the plot, because while I usually hate when people do this, I feel like the best way to get someone into the show is to just show them clips of it without any context and just say, yeah, this is what the show's about. Let me put you on to Death Parade. This is Quindecim, which is a bar that is exclusively visited by couples of 2 people who have coincidentally died at the same time, and they're forced to play games with each other so that ultimately the arbiter can decide who goes to heaven and who goes to hell. And just saying that out loud, this seems like the absolute worst possible system for determining anything really, much less who goes to heaven and hell. Like, imagine the tragic death of a starving Ethiopian child happened at the same time the United Healthcare CEO got sent straight to Valhalla. And you're telling me that this guy gets to go to heaven just because he's better at beer pong than the Ethiopian toddler? No, that's fucked up. And that's why in this anime, those coincidental deaths usually turn out to not be coincidences. There's almost always something tying the deaths of these two people together, and that's where I think this show shines through, when it explores this relationship. The games are just a small part of the essence of the show, as the real stakes are built through the backstories of the characters that are slowly fed to us throughout the course of the games. Decim is our stoic arbiter, but he's also responsible for deciding the ultimate fates of whoever walks in. This is a show that simply deals with the raw emotions and drama that you'd expect to see when these characters find out how they died. All the backstories are amazing, the show just has vibes, and it presents really interesting themes. Dandadan was a show that clicked with me almost immediately. And when I found out it was made by a dude who worked for the dude that made Chainsaw Man, it all started to make so much sense to me. This specific brand of weirdness, a story that's somehow serious, while at the same time being the most post-ironic piece of anime/manga I've ever consumed. Because mind you, you are going to be watching this show, getting engrossed with all the characters, their emotions, the conflicts they face, even down to the spirits that they face off against, with some of the most emotional moments in the entire show having to do with the backstories of these spirits. And then you remember that the plot of the show is the main cast trying to track down the main character's left and right nut that the cock gobbler granny stole from him in episode 1. For me, this is like the equivalent of music nerds finding out that the genre they just got obsessed with, I don't know, post-alternative heavy fungus jazz, is actually just a subgenre of bohemian punk calculus core, which is their favorite genre. I was destined to love Dandadan. It's got aliens and evil spirits, but by far the biggest surprise of this anime was how jaw-droppingly beautiful it is. And this goes for the anime and the manga as well. The anime is easily one of the most stylistically pleasing shows I've seen in a while, with an absolute masterpiece of an opening. And if you're like me and just couldn't wait another passing second while the show was airing and read some of the manga, you might expect a noticeable downgrade, considering this series just got the greatest adaptation of the year. But and you mean to fucking tell me that this shit comes out weekly? There's a reason why other very recognizable manga authors have gone on record voicing their opinion that yes, this guy is actually not human. So yeah, I love this show, easily the best of 2024 for me. The way I remember Devilman Crybaby is like a psychedelic trip where you experience this jumbled blur of random but cool shit happening. But then at some point you just sober up and in full clarity you see this. Don't worry guys, that's just milk. With high viscosity. Devilman Crybaby is one of the most unique anime in the history of unique anime. It's a show that does that stupid anime trope where the main character starts out as this beta cuck League of Legends player, but through the power of anime, he transforms into this preeminent alpha male Elden Ring enjoyer. Which is something that is usually the definition of corny 12-year-old self-insert schlop, but when put in the hands of Masaki Yuasa, it hits different. It isn't just the fact that the protagonist transitions from a cuck to a cuckold. There's more substance to it. After everything, Akira is still that crybaby who has a burning desire to do good. The main character, through a series of events, becomes a half-human, half-devil hybrid, and seemingly goes through a permanent change because of it. So throughout the entire show, devils come for him, in more ways than one, and he has to fend off against all of them. This is definitely one of the most unfiltered and straight up just raw anime to ever release. It feels like something that can't exactly decide whether it wants to be straight up hentai porn or straight up gore porn. So definitely this isn't a show for everyone, but for those who are there for it, Devilman Crybaby is truly a one of a kind type of show. And I absolutely loved it the whole way through. Great Pretender was sick. I vividly remember it was coming out the same time everyone was drooling over one of the Attack on Titan seasons airing, and so as a result, this show got overshadowed a little. But that's such a shame because how much sheer fun I had my entire time watching. This show is about this one dude who basically became a top 500 fraudster in Asian servers, so he decided to Q&A. He pulls up to Los Angeles, the land of Anime Expo and Wildfire. There he meets some NA fraudsters who are on a completely different level, and together they pull off some of the longest and most over-the-top cons you could ever imagine. Like, imagine the biggest fraud you know. I know this one dude that would genuinely swap out his entire personality depending on what race the person he was talking to was. He was known as the cultural chameleon. But anyways, and imagine giving them resources and the absolute freedom to just fuck around and find out. Wouldn't you have this morbid curiosity on what the hell they do? Great Pretender is basically just that, with an absolutely amazing art direction and just production as a whole. It's Wit Studio, so just lock in. Heavenly Delusions was a show that was coming out right under my nose. It was only last year during spring, and for 12 long weeks while existing in the anime community, I did not hear so much as an utterance of this show. Only until after it started airing, I think, did people really start to notice its quality. I think it might be because the show is simply just best enjoyed as a binge, because it focuses on two completely separate perspectives throughout its runtime. In one of them, we see a duo of a guy and girl team up in this post-apocalyptic world filled with man-eating monsters in order to find a place that they call heaven. You might say that they have a heavenly delusion, if you know what I mean. But on the other side of the world, we follow institutionalized children that seem to be living calm, peaceful lives, which obviously contrasts with the absolute chaos happening elsewhere. But this setting that the story spent about half of its time on had an atmosphere that always felt off. The only way I could describe it is that it seemed a lot like Promised Netherland. Of course, I won't spoil anything, but I love the vibe of this place. And then elsewhere in the other setting is where this show truly separates itself with a great duo with amazing chemistry and likable personalities. And then we also get some meaningful world building, which then in turn makes us look back at events that have happened in the other setting and makes us ask questions and think more. I think this show is incredibly well planned out with a great concept and executes greatly on it. By the time I'm writing this, Orb on the Movements of the Earth hasn't even finished airing, yet I'm still convinced it's a must-watch. I was originally planning on placing this show in the tier above this one, but I ended up not going through with it because there's a little uncertainty with its ending. But this show's about a kid in 15th century Poland who's pretty much indifferent to the times. He just wants to coast through life in an easy profession. Although one man changes the trajectory of his entire life when he introduces him to heliocentrism, which is a theory that postulates that the sun and planets don't orbit around the Earth, but the Earth and the planets orbit around the sun. Although with the threat of a death sentence for engaging in heresy against the church, this 12-year-old kid has to study in absolute secrecy. It's an incredibly well-written, tense show that really captures the era it's supposed to take place in. Honestly, there's so much more I want to say about this show, but because it's so easy to spoil, I'll just end it here. Highly recommend it. If there's one thing I hate more than Leafy's here, it's probably K-On! Just kidding, that's impossible. But K-On! Reserves a special place along with other anime that I will watch instead of taking sleeping meds. This is the exact type of anime that I hate. I mean, look at this. Does this look like something Batman would watch? Yeah, no, that's what I thought. So when people started hyping up this new show about girls forming a band in high school, I just couldn't get the thought out of my head that this was going to be the spawn of the absolute worst case scenario. Gen Z K-On!, also known as Bocchi the Rock. So this anime is about exactly what you'd expect. High school girls who are musically inclined get together and they form a band. But the massive thing that caught everyone off guard with this show is that all these girls actually have personality. Which, I know what you're thinking, seems kind of unrealistic. But it really goes to show you how one of a kind this show is. Bocchi, the main character, has crippling social anxiety, to the point where she's never had a single friend all the way from high school. You know, I was gonna make a joke like, average K-On! Fan, but this is just kind of sad. Although I do think this is the reason this show resonated with so many people, because of the main character's social awkwardness. As a person who generally considers himself an introvert, it's hard not to see some of myself in Bocchi. Hell, no matter who you are, it's hard to not relate with her on some level. And seeing her overcome that extreme anxiety bit by bit felt so rewarding. Another thing that surprised me is that this show is funny, like really funny sometimes. Every time the bassist opens her mouth, I know I'm about to hear the most sarcastic thing I've ever heard in my life, but it somehow still always caught me off guard. So yeah, this is basically K-On! It feels good. Getting into Carole and Tuesday was a lot like getting into macaroni and cheese. You don't look at a nice homemade dish of mac and cheese with the expectation that it's gonna be dog shit. You know for certain from everything you've seen about it that this is gonna bang. This show belongs to that genre of anime I've recently started liking where the main character leaves everything behind to pursue their passion. It's made by the same imminent god himself, Shinichiro Watanabe, the person also behind Cowboy Bebop and a bunch of other amazing shit. And also, the show just generally looks beautiful. So there was just zero chance that I wasn't gonna mess with this. And the show surprised me in more ways than one. I feel like describing the plot of this show to people is just impossible. Because would you believe me if I told you that this show is about the equivalent of Baron Trump abandoning his support for his father's campaign to start an interracial pop duet band with an illegal immigrant? No? You don't believe me? Well, I guess you're just gonna have to watch it. But if you're still not convinced and the premise doesn't sound attractive to you, I get it. Not all of us are into music, but I hope that we've all had passions and dreams before, since that's really the only requirement to get hopelessly attached to the main characters. Carole and Tuesday make a phenomenal pair. Both of them have lovable personalities and style, and they absolutely tear it up in the music department. Obviously, I don't want to risk triggering any YouTube's copyright system, but trust me when I say that seriously, the soundtrack of this anime is probably the most high budget and high production I've ever witnessed. It's to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if I saw half of this soundtrack straight up just placed on the Hot 100. They quite literally have songs that range from straight up Skrillex all the way to The Weeknd, and they're all in English too. Watanabe is an insane man. He's just crazy. I don't know how he does this shit. So the show takes place on Mars, where Carole and Tuesday dream to one day make it big in an industry where almost 99% of songs are AI generated. And while a lot of people call this show futuristic and science fiction, I personally call this next month. By the halfway point of the show, Carole and Tuesday pretty much get their breakthrough in the industry, and this is also where the show takes a dramatic change in terms of tone. To put it kind of bluntly, it becomes political. And listen, I've seen The Boys, so I know how disastrous this could turn out in practice. But I almost didn't mind it when it came to Carole and Tuesday. Problems with this stuff usually emerge when the politics feels too forced or shoehorned in, and this show does neither of those things. I know some people will disagree with me, but either way, this show is not perfect by any means, but it's also something I thoroughly enjoyed, and I love everything that this man creates. Land of the Lustrous is about immortal androgynous Steven Universe gems that fight against the witches from Madoka Magica. So from my understanding, this show flew under a ton of people's radars, maybe because it was full CGI, but I'm not even gonna hold you. The CGI genuinely enhances the show incredibly. I mean, just look at it, come on. It's made by the same studio that did Beastars, and people genuinely jerk off to that shit. So in my investigation to find out why no one really talks about this anime, I searched up the manga, and I found that this has almost a 9 rating on my anime list, which is basically Fullmetal Alchemist numbers. And the reason I was doing my investigation was because I really liked it, and was sad that nobody seems to really talk about it anymore. So Land of the Lustrous is about Phos, or Phospholite, who is honestly a great protagonist. It's rare for a show's main character to capture my interest just by pure virtue of their specific attributes, but Phos's specific attribute is that she's a fucking dumbass, and boom, I'm hooked. If there's one thing that I'll always defend in media, it's regarded as characters who are sometimes so dumb they're dangerous. But I think characters like that are so insanely interesting because first, they're funny as hell, and second, they always introduce a factor of randomness to whatever show they're in, and usually end up moving the plot along in ways that the audience would have never expected. So seeing a dumb idiot in the driver's seat was instantly interesting to me, especially in a story with such a unique world. So let's talk about that world. Land of the Lustrous takes place on Earth, but wait, why are the only sentient beings rocks you'd mine for at Y level -50? Well, we don't know, and that's one of the many mysteries of this show. There are 28 crystalline humanoids who are named after gemstones, and they all have some sort of job to accomplish in their long lives. Some of them are tasked with fixing and melding people back together after they're injured, and others are to defend the realm from moon invaders, who are alien things who hunt down gemstones to take them back to the moon and turn them into decoration for the rest of their lives. Yeah, it gets pretty insane. And we, as the audience, kind of forget that this shit is all insane because we're experiencing this story from the perspective of this easygoing, airheaded protagonist. I just love how the mystery is presented and ultimately unfolds, and I really appreciate the themes that Ichikawa was going for. Oshinoko is a masterpiece of emotions. The author knows exactly how to pull on heartstrings, when to do it, and how to make it have a lasting effect on the audience that will persist for the entire show's duration. Oshinoko is about acting, idols, YouTube, social media, and all of those things combined. But it's a seinen because of its absolutely insane plot, where these two random fans of an idol girl reincarnate into that idol girl's children. But then the first episode plays out and all of it culminates into a scene that can make a stone monument cry like a baby. Then both of these siblings get all emo and vow to take revenge on the perpetrator. And this show accomplishes a ton with this premise. It sets up a show that will easily develop into a dark cat and mouse game that will definitely keep the audience always guessing. But it also sets up for a very unique show that tackles the inner workings of various industries like idols, acting, and a variety of other adjacent industries. But one thing I love about it is how it covers shit that anime never usually considers, like dealing with cyberbullying and traversing certain social media sites. And it's so dumb how I say, oh, it tackles some rare issues that anime normally doesn't cover, and then I'm just talking about how the show has the characters using the fucking World Wide Web. I have no idea why I'm watching anime in 2024 and then just still be using flip phones. Like, come on, we gotta move on, bro. But anyways, this show looks absolutely beautiful from just a visual standpoint. And this is one of the shows that I genuinely struggle to find anything wrong with. When writing this script, I felt so compelled the entire time writing about this to compare it to one of my favorite animated films of all time, Perfect Blue, since they tackle similar themes, but they are so fundamentally distinct in everything but theme that the comparison would mean less than nothing. Although I do feel like what made Perfect Blue transcend everything else was not its theme, but how it executed on its theme. The movie accomplishes communicating its message in this concise, downright artistic fashion that I think might be the one thing missing from Oshinoko that I haven't seen yet in the anime. When it came to Your Lie in April, I was part of the problem. I was one of those guys that watched the show and immediately became obsessed with being a pianist. And I didn't even know what a pianist was the first time I watched the show. I was like 12. I thought they were saying penis. But nonetheless, I tried my best for a grand total of 3 days to become a penis. That joke sounded way better in my head. So Your Lie in April is about a young pianist who gets traumatized by his mother's death and as a result can't hear the sounds of the piano anymore. That is until his life gets turned upside down by this bubbly eccentric violinist who eventually forms a piano violin duo with him. The whole show really feels like a love letter to classical music. And while that wouldn't be my first pick if I just wanted to put something on, it definitely made me come to appreciate the genre of music way more as we see all these characters dedicate their entire being to their passion. I really love everything about this show, from the characters to the story all the way to the ending. I've heard a lot of criticisms for this ending, all the way from it's out of left field to it's predictable, but I actually never had a problem with it. I thought it was executed on really well. So Nana was something that my girlfriend, at the time at least, forced me to watch with her. And listen, I'm that type of dude when watching a romance drama show to be like,
for the sake of your happiness, I will do everything within my power. I promise.
Bro, where's the fights, bro? Normally getting me into a shoujo is pretty much an impossible challenge, like showing me a JoJo meme that's funny. I fell asleep watching Fruits Basket. Maid-sama, I think I dropped that shit in like 3 minutes. Yona of the Dawn was actually really good, I'll give you that. But Nana, this shit hits different. Maybe that's because it felt less anime than normal anime romances out there. I don't know how to describe it. It just feels less tropey. It's just a story about real people with real problems. And every character is so likable. It's about these two girls with the same name, Nana, who by a twist of fate move in together. Black Nana, who I'm calling because of her hair, comes to Tokyo to pursue her own independent career in music after separating with her boyfriend, who happens to be in a famous band. And then the other Nana, who's a dumb fuck. That's it. That's her entire character. Eventually, they form their own band, and there's a bunch of drama and love triangles. But I felt engaged the whole way through, and I think that's because I was just sold on all the characters and easily got invested in their problems. I vividly remember watching a ProZD skit that was making fun of romance anime, and all the characters in the video are just portrayed as sentient furniture. Literally. And I was dying for like 5 minutes straight because it was funny as fuck, but also because he seriously captured all my problems with the genre in 40 seconds. I just cannot find it in me to care about any of the characters in romance stuff a lot of the times, because normally they don't feel like real people to me. Although Nana was a nice change of pace. And that soundtrack was something else. Shit's peak. So let's turn back the clock 5 entire years to 2020, to the canon event that changed everyone's lives in a drastic, almost irreversible way. The release of Cardi B's new hit single, WAP, which, hold on, cut the damn video. Who the fuck wrote this in my script? The real canon event was COVID-19, and then blah blah blah, toilet paper, Zoom bombs, all that. But the big point is that people had way more time on their hands than otherwise. And I remember my brother's best friend at the time posted his first video on YouTube, modestly titled, "So I read all of Beastars, ... And this shit just kind of blew up out of nowhere. It was a good video, don't get me wrong, but I've never seen a video like this attract so much engagement in such a short amount of time, practically out of thin air. So after scrolling through the comments, the answer came to me almost instantly. The answer was furries. They all came together to show their love for this manga at the same time. So I was left with one question. Just, what is this? I'm not even gonna lie to any of you, back in 2020, I would be that one kid who would unironically say shit like, "Oh, I suppose if you want to be seen as an animal so badly, I guess you wouldn't have a problem being hunted like one." But then Beastars came out, Scamboli made a video on it, and now I was wondering whether to base my persona on Tony the Tiger or the Coca-Cola polar bear. But anyways, all of this is to say that I went into Beastars thinking that all the hype surrounding it is because of the small but loud voices of furries, because all the characters in this show are anthropomorphic representations of different animals. Although what I always thought was a very obvious gimmick to appeal to the furries turned out to be the very catalyst for virtually all the conflict in the show. Everyone in the show resembles some sort of real animal. And the cool thing is that they don't just take the appearance of the animals just for the fun of it. A large part of their behavior, culture, and society takes shape because of all the unique and interesting species that live inside there. And that's also the reason why a huge cultural divide naturally separated the world of Beastars into two camps: herbivores and carnivores. In this world, it's possible for carnivores to live without meat, but it's said that once they're given a taste of the real thing, they can never go back. Legoshi is a carnivore high school student, but his soft-spoken and delicate nature deeply contrasts with his outwardly intimidating appearance as a gray wolf. This setup is honestly genius. Not only does it establish an amazing conflict, but it's also a premise that makes for a story that doesn't even have to try at all to be extremely prescient to real life. At the end of the day, Beastars is a tale about victims and victimizers. Not one side ever holds a chance at understanding the other, and their surface level tolerance of the other side is held together by reciprocal fear. That is, until a socially awkward wolf falls in love with this defenseless rabbit. And the rest is honestly something you should see yourself. When it came out, I saw so many people sleeping on it, but trust me, you won't regret it. Prison is a terrible place to be. Locked up for years on end while watching your life pass you by, all because you smoked weed once as a 16-year-old. And then you have to put up with your cellmates that consist of 3 genuine supervillains and a Boondocks character. Anyways, Pluto is also in jail. Netflix jail, to be more precise. And this show needs your help. You could help by watching it. It's great. Don't worry. Whatever methods you may use to get there, your secret's safe with me. Pluto is about a society many years in the future where robots have become so human that they've started to get their own rights. Yeah, that's right. Calling them claggers is now a racial slur tantamount to hate speech. I might even get cancelled for saying it, and who knows. The story focuses on Jessich, a robot detective who's tasked with investigating a string of murders, all with the victims being important robot figureheads. But as he digs deeper and deeper, the assailant starts getting more and more mysterious, almost to the point where the killer seems less like a physical entity and more like a metaphorical divine smite exacted on these victims for one reason or another. There are so many moving parts to this show, whether it be with the characters and their backstories or the many layers of mystery this show has, until it's all revealed at the end. Okay, I want to start this out with an anecdote. I attend an American university, an engineering student. I have tough homework. If you've ever complained about your homework before, I'm just gonna say it straight, even if your homework took a Viagra, mine would still be 10 times harder. So a lot, and I mean a lot of people around me cheat themselves by using whatever AI. And then whenever I actually do an assignment legitimately, it's kind of like that one image of that guy in the swimming pool in clean water while everyone else pissed themselves. Serial Experiments Lain means a lot of things to a lot of people. It's a classic, and one of the most impressive things about this is how it meant something very different 2 decades ago to now. Lain was a very important anime for its time. It warned about the potential dangers of digitalization, and it outright predicted concepts like digital personas and VR chat. But now, in a society practically engulfed by the very thing this show was trying to warn us about, everything is recontextualized. It's like the show got a new wrapping. Generative AI, self-driving cars. Oh, what was that? Kai Cenat had a Tesla robot on stream and it threw up gang signs? Alright, cool. And I'm sure some other wild shit will happen while I'm editing this video. Humanity is quickly getting closer and closer to fully letting go of the steering wheel, literally and figuratively, to completely relying on technology on a daily basis. It's frightening, and Serial Experiments Lain is like an outlet for that fear. It's this visceral, convoluted entanglement of different characters with motives we don't understand, even down to the main character, but we don't have to understand it because we know that this is wrong, that something is off. The characters feel less and less human as the show goes on. Lain becomes swept up in their online persona, and suddenly reality becomes subjective and other people become nothing more than NPCs. Overall, this show is a classic that aged like fine wine, and the opening is still top 5. Paranoia Agent is one of my favorite Satoshi Kon things out there. Kon is a man that is obsessed with the human perception of reality. We can clearly see that in one of Kon's most influential films to date, Paprika, where reality is treated as an entirely malleable concept that warps and bends to the whims of characters. Although I think Paranoia Agent has my favorite interpretation of this malleable reality that Kon is obsessed with. The series focuses on several characters we follow over the course of the whole show. More specifically, every episode focuses on the unique perspective of a specific character, as each one of them are heavily burdened by the mundane stresses and anxiety of daily life. The daily life of a call girl, an office worker, or a middle schooler. The one thing that links all of these characters together is the disconnect between the reality that they view themselves living in and real life. You see, Paranoia Agent isn't all that concerned with how us, the audience, view these characters, but more focus is given to how they see themselves, which is often this alternate reality that is sometimes even adjacent to fantasy. Like with the story of a crooked cop who owes the Yakuza a great debt, and is forced to commit a string of robberies in order to pay it off. And although it may seem pathetic to the viewer, to him he sees himself as a righteous father who's got to do what he's got to do in order to protect his family. When in actuality, the manner in which he got indebted to the Yakuza in the first place runs completely orthogonal to his family man guys. In every one of these characters' cases, they were living some sort of fantasy to escape some sort of physical thing plaguing their life. But the connection that is drawn between all of them is the sadistic attacks of this little kid known as Little Slugger. And as we start to learn more about this mysterious figure, his existence seems so unexplainable that the detectives on the case start to doubt his existence entirely. So if you want to get into something less conventional and older, this might be for you. This isn't anime. This is art. Fooly Cooly is as close to a piece of literature as you're ever going to get with an anime series. I hated, and I mean hated, Fooly Cooly the first time I watched it. I seriously don't know how I can communicate the violent rage this show filled me with. I just didn't really mess with it at the time. It kind of just felt like things were just happening with no rhyme or reason. But what really made me hate the show was hearing this phrase: "You just don't get it." This traumatic sequence of words sent me through a frenzy, an irrational spiral of torment and anguish that would only end today. Since I finally gave this show another shot, and I loved it. Maybe it was an age thing, since at the time I didn't really understand any of the subtle shit that this anime was going for, and even some of the non-subtle shit. But I think now I get it. Fooly Cooly is something I've never seen before. The narrative is this fast-paced, almost absent-minded fever dream that recalls the unbelievable memories of Naota's adolescence as he meets Haruko, the first woman who's ever seen him in a sexual way, but who's also impossible as a romantic partner since she's way older. In other words, she's the exact type of fantasy girl a boy his age would dream up. Someone who's too good to be true. Someone who might as well be an alien. Well, actually, she is an alien. I guess that was kind of on the nose. But Fooly Cooly is an easily misunderstood piece of fiction because it's an extremely indecisive show in many ways. Like, it can't decide whether it wants to be a manga or an anime, or if it wants to be South Park or not, or if it's really living up to your interpretation of the show. You might walk out of the first few episodes with your own feelings on what the show is really about, but then you see a scene like this.
Who are you really?
I'm an illusion of your youth, a manifestation of the feelings in your adolescent heart.
Where'd you get that line from? Anime?
And it feels like the show is just looking at you and just saying, you're fucking stupid. But what I think this scene is really trying to communicate to us is that there is no one true interpretation of Fooly Cooly. It's whatever you make of it. Definitely not a show for everyone, but one thing that is for sure is that this show is kryptonite for video essayists. Oh yeah, also this anime has like one of the greatest anime soundtracks of all time. I'm not even joking, and I'm not even the biggest fan of alternative rock, but I have to admit, it slaps. There truly isn't a way I could fully capture the adrenaline rush to be had from watching Redline. Oh wait. There is one way. Gurren Lagann, that's the only possible way I could even begin to describe the sheer epicness of this anime. When it comes to the plot of Redline, it's short, sweet, and straight to the point. Every 5 years, the biggest racing tournament across the cosmos is held called Redline. The only rule, there are no rules. Our main character is a dude who qualifies for Redline, and that's all you need to know about this movie to enjoy it. When it comes to the visual presentation of Redline, words fail me. This is Studio Madhouse with a Disney budget. I don't know where the hell they got the funding for this movie, but it is one of the most visually stunning animations I've ever seen, period. Redline is all about the visual experience. There's a diverse range of character designs from humans all the way to whatever this is. The movie is such a creative spectacle that will have you either with your jaw on the floor, laughing, or crying. It was really surprising to see a story with such a minimal plot have moments that will just hit you like a fucking truck and send your ass to another world. But Redline achieved that while also having some of the most hype and beautiful scenes I've ever witnessed in anime. Kaiji is a gambling anime, and so when I saw this genre tag under its description, this is the only shit I could think of. But I actually had some hope looking at it from the outside. It didn't seem like psycho-sadistic fascist cat girl was on the menu today, but I never let go of my suspicions when going into this anime. But this show is tough. I ended up enjoying it so much for a reason I only realized after watching the entire show. Because in retrospect, looking at all the various gambling / death game anime out there, especially after experiencing Kaiji, they all feel sort of cheap. No Game No Life has a sick aesthetic, but half of the quote-unquote genius strategic plays are pretty much strategic asspulls, and for a vast majority of these types of shows, they aren't as witty as they might think they are. My point is that the people in Kaiji are actually just smart people. So smart that I actually found this show to be one of the most unpredictable rides I've ever had in anime. And it's funny how my mind immediately went to compare this to No Game No Life, because now that I think about it more, these two shows are genuinely polar opposites. Kaiji is this hopeless, grim, psychological tale about a man willing to literally gamble away his entire life to repay his massive debt that he owes. It's really a commentary on the lengths that we as a society are willing to go for money, especially in scarce circumstances. And then No Game No Life, which is about these whimsical gamers who get isekai'd into a colorful game world and game so much and game so hard that they literally game all over God himself. I just found the comparison funny. So yeah, watch Kaiji. I had a great time with it. Parasyte is an extremely classic manga that came out in the 80s, and the only relevant and highly acclaimed adaptation to this is Parasyte Part 1, as we all know. Okay, obviously this is a joke, but honestly, now that I've seen CGI Migi, I could die without any regrets. But the real adaptation I'm obviously referring to is Parasyte the Maxim, and Studio Madhouse locked in for this one. Do you know about that trend we've been seeing in anime for a while now, especially in shonen, but not limited to it, where the main character ends up as some sort of hybrid human of whatever monster they're fighting against? So for example, in Kaiju number 8, the main protagonist gets turned into a half kaiju, half human mutation. You could trace this trope back all the way to the Parasyte manga. It was the first to do this kind of trope successfully. It's about a boy that gets his insides ravaged by an alien, and this kid's not a freak, so he doesn't really vibe with what's going on, but the alien ultimately fuses with the boy's body, and they each have to learn how to live with a biologically and instinctually different organism while also staving off other aliens. I think that Parasyte is probably one of, if not the best hybrid show out there, with the dynamic between Migi and Shinichi being incredibly fleshed out. And I love how instead of just using the hybrid plotline as a way to make an OP protagonist, the show also takes this set of circumstances to explore deeper themes, like what it means to be human. I really appreciated this show when I watched it. Wealth, fame, power. The man who attained everything the world could offer, left his treasure all in one piece. This is clearly the seinen version of One Piece, with the only real difference being that it's set in the early 1900s Japan, and instead of pirates, the crew consists of a dysfunctional military veteran, the Scat King, and some tribal folk. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that they need to locate several criminals and skin them alive in order to piece together a map to the treasure. Okay, yeah, this shit is nothing like One Piece. So this show was passionately recommended to me by my significant other, and I decided to respect her opinion and get to it almost half a year later. But wow, I do not regret giving it a shot. But the first episode of the anime made me spit out the water I was drinking, since I have heard stories, folktales passed down orally from generation to generation, and was surprised to see that it originated in this show. But those stories all revolve around this thing. This is not just a bear. But let me explain. Do any of you guys remember X-Arm? Yeah, it's like one of the producers of that abomination infiltrated the production of just this one episode, squatted on top of it, and shat on it. That shit is this bear. Literally, the rest of the anime looks good. It's just this bear, which is unfathomably right smack dab in the first episode, which is supposed to hook people in. So just cover your eyes when you get to this scene. The rest of the show is good, trust me. So Golden Kamuy is about this psychopath that tattoos a bunch of criminals, promising each one that they have a map to his treasure that they themselves can decipher. But it turns out that a single criminal's tattoos isn't actually the map. It's a fragment of it. And they can't actually read it themselves in the first place because it stretches across their entire body. So the only reliable way to read it would be to skin them alive and look at the skin on a flat surface. And that's exactly what Sugimoto aims to accomplish. So he meets up with this tribal girl, Ashripa, who's actually my favorite character. I like her design and personality, but furthermore, I love how her culture of the Ainu is developed throughout the entire show. It feels all so believable to me. And that's actually because the author expressly borrowed various cultural traditions from dozens of ethnicities and combined them all in the Ainu. Even if it's an amalgamation of different cultures, it all still feels solid. Like before their coming of age, parents would name their children after revolting names. Like one kid is named like Boner, one guy is named Dog Shit. And it actually makes sense, like just think of it logically. Like have you ever met someone named Bob who looks nothing like a Bob would or should look like? They give them real names after they actually develop into fully grown teenagers and actually develop their own personality. I just love how they have their own unique customs, language, and food. Actually, food is a big part of the show too. I guess the author knows a lot about this stuff because when the show is not a fucked up One Piece creepypasta, it always goes in depth about how the crew hunts and how they prepare meals. Honestly, it's very educational, but that's not why we're here. We're here for the action, the skinning, the scat king. And trust me, those are all here in a big way. There's so many moving parts to this show, like trying to figure out who's actually in cahoots with who and keeping track of the sheer number of different factions and groups that are looking for the treasure, even down to the fucking military. Every single criminal that is introduced is just so... I can't even give a broad description because they're all so different. One guy is this masochistic sailor that gets a boner every time Sugimoto holds up a sharp object because he imagines himself being brutally slaughtered by him. Another guy practices taxonomy for a living, and it's revealed that he killed all of his close relatives, stuffed them up, and started hallucinating conversations with them. Also, this guy makes fucking BDSM outfits out of human skin. He isn't even a criminal either. I just want to talk about him, to be honest. Every single character is so fun. I feel like one of the reasons this anime is slept on is because of the bear, in all honesty. I'm serious about this. That bear did more damage than Hurricane Sandy. Golden Kamuy would be more well known than Jesus Christ himself if it wasn't for that stupid ass bear. To Your Eternity was one of those shows to me that was really hard to write about. Because how do I communicate that a show is just beautiful? It's technically a supernatural drama, but it's way more than that. It has some great action, but the show is just way more than just action. It delves into this unfamiliar world as we follow the journey of an empty shell, as it learns the qualities of being human from scratch. And that's really all this show is. It's about learning what humans are all about, from the lowest lows to the highest highs. I really didn't expect to connect with this show on such a deep level, but I think that's just a testament to how good the writing of this show is, and how masterfully every single character was handled. I'd seriously recommend this to anyone if you haven't seen it. Please get on this. Look Back is a special film to me. It's based on a one-shot created by the same guy who's only responsible for The Chainsaw Man. And when people hear that, they immediately start preparing to watch the weirdest shit they've ever seen in their life. Understandably. But surprisingly, it seems like Fujimoto put away his quirky side to just make a story about art. For manga authors, art is something that literally consumes their entire being, which is why when they make art about art, it always turns out to be some of my favorite stuff the medium has ever spit out. The same is true for Look Back. The film is about these two girls that start drawing manga, and we follow them as they grow up and become adults. It's a quick watch, only an hour long. I think you should give it a shot. Bleach was my first anime. And I feel like with a lot of valid things you could say against this anime, there's also a flip side to it. Like sure, at times Hueco Mundo was a little bit copy and paste from Soul Society, where it features Ichigo and the gang invading a foreign land and tackling the ranks of this newly discovered society with minimal knowledge about the world in general. But there's also the flip side where the anime at least just out of nowhere pulls up with a Spanish guitar and just starts shredding that shit on top of fight scenes. The Bleach soundtrack is one of the most memorable and unique in anime as a whole. I mean, obviously, it's Shio Sagasu, the same person that crafted legendary OST of Evangelion. It was bound to be a banger. Also, in Hueco Mundo, we get introduced to literally the coolest character designs that we've ever seen Kubo draw, and some of the best fights. By the way, I was focusing on Hueco Mundo because apparently a lot of people hate it, but looking elsewhere, Soul Society is truly a masterclass of shonen writing at the time, and still today. I think what makes Soul Society so great is the novelty of it all. Ichigo and friends start out in the first 15 episodes or so inside this tiny little human town, and the concept of soul reapers and Zanpakuto are spoon-fed to the gang. But then abruptly they're forced to engage with this society that they know nothing about, with no information on anything, and instead of being spoon-fed about these supernatural systems at play, nobody is there to guide them at all. I think the reason why this arc speaks to so many people is because it may or may not be a coming of age story in essence. There's also the fact that the power system is sick, and Ichigo is actually a really cool main character that makes the show such a great watch. Oh, also the 1,000-Year Blood War arc is doing its thing, and it's honestly just great shonen. Thank the lords it got a good adaptation.
Saiki K is my favorite comedy anime out there. So Saiki is this stupidly overpowered psychic that can genuinely change the mass of the proton without lifting a finger. But unlike the normal progression of a story like this where the main character hides his godlike omnipotent powers in order to reveal it at some sort of magic academy to impress all of his future harem members, Saiki wants nothing to do with any of that. His outlandish goal in classic shonen fashion is just to be ordinary, a side character. But he finds himself attracting a ton of room temperature IQ NPCs that always end up forcing Saiki's hand. It's just the funniest thing in the world to see how the nature of some characters mixed with the intense refined idiocy from some other characters always end up in a situation where Saiki has to do his job as the protagonist. This show is sheer genius.
Okay, let me try to sell to you the insane POV I had watching this show. This was one of the isekai I was watching for my isekai video that was weirdly hyped up, and that either means one of two things if you're, talking about something in this genre. You're either getting the second coming of Re:Zero or Mushoku Tensei, like one of those like top tier shows just in general, even outside of isekai, or you're getting the premiere of the most hyped up show in the community, Dog Shit 2 or some shit like that. So I went into this pretty hesitantly, but I was not prepared for anything that came my way. The main character is literally a LARPing psychopathic murder hobo who loves to roleplay. Just imagine a show about your fantasies as a middle schooler to be some mysterious omnipotent edgelord who's genuinely an entity beyond everyone else's comprehension. And as a middle schooler, you have no fucking morals, so our main self-insert Sid Kagano doesn't really give a fuck about anything. He literally cares about one thing and one thing only. Or that's it. This guy is ironic Sun Jin-woo. And originally I thought this was a serious isekai. Like the first episode, it was pretty funny, but like not funny as I was laughing with it. I was kind of laughing at it. But immediately I knew it was fucking with me was when Sid, the main character, founded his organization called Shadow Garden, and their group motto was, "We who lurk in the shadows to hunt the shadows." And then there's the Excalibur scene. If you know, you know. All around, one of my favorite comedy shows in anime, but definitely not for everyone. Princess Mononoke is the best Ghibli movie. Fuck you, fight me. Okay, to be fair, I never got into Ghibli at a young age, so Princess Mononoke probably stands out to me simply because it's by far the most mature movie out of their whole catalog. This movie is about a young prince who gets entangled in a bloody war waged by the forest spirits and this savage princess against this city called the Iron Fortress. And the thing that sparked this war was the excessive deforestation that the city brought about. And overall, this is a story that personifies the never-ending ugly conflict between man and nature, where both sides fight a desperate bloody battle for the right to live in this shared space. And then there's My Neighbor Totoro, where this girl meets this bunny thing and they take LSD together. Or something. I've never watched it, but that's pretty much my impression of the movie. And the whole reason I'm pointing out Totoro is just because it really speaks to the sheer flexibility that Miyazaki has when it comes to storytelling. That he's able to write stories on both ends of the spectrum. It honestly reminded me of that one meme a couple years back when Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal came out on the same day. This is like obviously a less extreme version, but it's really a jarring difference. So yeah, I love Princess Mononoke. So it's really insane to me how Hajime no Ippo shattered the image of what boxing actually is to me. It follows our main guy, Ippo, on his journey to becoming a professional boxer. And you might see this old art style and say, no thanks, but look here. You see the studio behind this? It's the One Punch Man guys, the Free Ring guys, the Death Note guys, the fucking Hunter x Hunter guys. You can trust that you'll be eating good animation wise, regardless of art style. And oh no, another red flag. They're trying to crack jokes in this show? What the fuck? Is this gonna be a repeat of Haikyuu? No, it isn't. This show actually made me laugh quite a few times, and I feel like a lot of it is just because of the fact that Ippo is such a likable and charming dude that's surrounded by likable and charming dudes. His matches are always tense because we're seriously always rooting for the guy, but we're also always given perfect stakes on what's to come with Ippo's opponents. I seriously don't know what to say, just watch the show. When I'm in a dick-sucking contest and my opponent is a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fan, what do you think of this meme? Listen, I've known JoJo fans in real life, online too, and I will say one thing. They are strange. So because of these memes in my experience, I've always been hesitant to actually get into the show, but I ended up getting into it a few years back, and I deeply apologize to all the manga readers out there. I haven't read it, and I know Steel Ball is like the only thing y'all talk about, and it sounds amazing, don't get me wrong. I've been meaning to get into it, but this list only covers anime only then. But talking about JoJo's overall, it's just one of the funnest battle shonen out there. It's genuinely impossible to just not have a good time watching this. It has my second favorite power system in the genre, with stands providing for some of the most dynamic and interesting fights to watch, and all of the characters are just absolutely priceless to watch on screen. Like seriously, there's not one character from any of these parts from the main cast that I think are weak. Actually, let me do a little ranking inside the ranking, because I want to see if all of my takes on all of the arcs of JoJo's are controversial. So my least favorite is the first part. Not much to say here. I don't really think this is too controversial to say. The only good thing about this part is that Dio is introduced. Otherwise, Jonathan, I think, is kind of just a boring main character compared to the rest of the Joestars, in my opinion. The second to worst goes to part 3. Okay, honestly, there's a massive jump in enjoyment between part 1 and 3, and the rest of the parts are extremely close to me. But part 3, I think, suffered the most to me from its pacing, where I feel like this was one of the most dragged out shonen sagas I've sat through. But Jotaro's cool as fuck. I find it funny that this bitch is built like an Armstrong looking ass still in high school. I mean, you don't get more manly than that. And bro's still like a teenager too, so that's crazy. Dio is doing his thing. I think we see peak Dio in this arc. He makes donuts for a living. Also, this is where the stands are introduced, and while it is the first part to implement this genius system, I think its predecessors do a better job in highlighting its strength. And as much as I have issues with this part, I'll have to admit that the last fight between Dio and Jotaro easily solos everything to come before and after. So next up, we got part 2. It's just so fucking fun. Joseph is one of my favorite Joestars. He's fucking cool. He don't need no stands to carry him to victory. He mastered the obsolete power system, whatever it's called. Hammond?
and then he got a plane somehow. Kind of forgot how that happened. And he was just a menace in general. Part 6 is next, and honestly, I had to go back and finish this part because I swear to God, this got dealt some life-ending backshots by Netflix and its fucking abominable release schedule. It single-handedly killed all the hype and motivation for anyone to finish it. They dropped 12 episodes of this part a couple years back in a single day. We all binged it in that same day, and then Netflix is just like, okay, see you in like 6 months. Listen, I hate weekly releases just as much as the next guy, but it's like an empirical fact that weekly releases preserve the hype and talk about a show. Like, I'm genuinely curious about how many people finish this part if you're an anime only. And it stings even more because this arc is really good. I enjoyed it a lot. Jolene is a sick protagonist, the fights were all great, and I like the general plot a lot. Next, we got part 5, which has the objective greatest main and supporting cast of all of JoJo's. Bucciarati, Narancia, Abacchio, Mista, they're all masterfully written characters who all have great arcs and backstories. They're also just fucking fun to watch on screen and interact with each other. Giorno has the coolest powers of any Joestar out there and the best theme. I fuck with Diablo and his powers hard, like he's absolutely my second favorite villain in the show, but nobody can overtake the king. The entire plot just never let my attention wander. But by far the best part of this arc are its characters, in my opinion. Part 4 is my favorite of the anime so far, and I like it because unlike part 3, which sees the main guys literally traveling across the world in order to slay a greater world-threatening evil, it takes place in this small-scale town where the stakes are lowered instead of heightened. I personally love the dedication by Araki, and it plays out perfectly. He introduces one of my favorite villains in shonen who matches the minimum required freak to be considered a JoJo's fan. This part is so unique in the genre. I absolutely love the murder mystery shonen shit, and will absolutely kill for more shows like this.
Jujutsu Kaisen doesn't reinvent the wheel, but it's a damn good wheel. Season 1 is pretty much just a slightly above average battle shonen with a potentially nine-tailed fox situation with Itadori, but where this series truly reaches its peak is Season 2. Hidden Inventory captivated me. It was the first time I was really sold on the world of JJK, not because of some cool fight scene or episodic villain, but because of a huge shift in presentation. Like, coming from Season 1 and going straight into Hidden Inventory is trippy. I don't know about anyone else, but this artsy, subtextual character exploration is so dissimilar to the direct power fantasy shonen of Season 1 that it feels like we're experiencing works of two distinct authors. We are given a completely new and refreshing perspective of the world of JJK, all through our new main characters, which honestly have such a good dynamic, they absolutely mog Itadori and friends. I wish I could say that Hidden Inventory set the standard for the show, but it's more like the standout as compared to the arcs it's sandwiched between. See, as the arc progresses and things get more real, the show all of a sudden gets more existential and philosophical. We are given a grim and morbid POV of just about everything going on in the Jujutsu world, and for the first time, viewers are inclined to think. All because of one man, Suguru Geto. I absolutely fucking love this character. Everything from his character arc and downfall, to his morbid philosophy and pessimism, to even his powers and character design, all of this culminates into the best fight scene in the entire show, which is less a battle between cursed techniques and more a clash between worldviews. Okay, I'm sorry if I sound like a cringe-ass English teacher, but seriously, this is actually one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. Sure, some scenes are objectively more hype or just more pretty to look at, although this scene between Yuki and Geto gave me goosebumps. It verbalizes Geto's cognitive dissonance and fucked up state of mind after failing a mission. Geto's arc captivated me. It's very untypical that a shonen like this would even entertain bigger picture ideas. I started feeling truly impressed with the quality of JJK villain, with the detestable Mahito, and now Geto. Geto is truly an outstanding JJK character. Geto is the missing something that the show needed to be great from Season 1. Geto is the best JJK villain, is something I really wish I could have said. But we are hit with the biggest blue ball in all of anime. The Shibuya Incident arc is phenomenal, conceptually. Gege did a ton of building in season 1 and now he's trying to tear it all down, while also traumatizing the entire fanbase. I honestly wonder if Mappa and Gege fucking coordinated it so that every week would leave the fanbase more traumatized than the last, for manga readers and anime onlys. Although while the fanbase was busy having their 4th panic attack, I stood mildly disappointed. The Shibuya incident arc could have been great. It could have reached the heights of other GOAT anime arcs like the Chimera arc, but it was shot in the legs before it even started. You know those actions taken by someone that are just simply incomprehensible? You can't even begin to reason with the decision they've made, and to you, it's just plain stupid. Why in the world would Gege build up, develop, and give life to this masterclass of a villain, then kill him off screen and replace him with a villain we know nothing about? Genuinely, the only reason I could think of from the author's perspective is that writing Kenjaku is easier than it would have been writing Geto. Because think of it this way, Kenjaku is really just a simpler villain. He's just evil and we don't even know what his motive actually is. A motiveless, evil villain is easier to write than an idealist who thinks they have a righteous end goal. In my opinion, the Kenjaku fumble is the biggest incident of this arc. Otherwise, it's hard to disregard that objectively, this arc does have some of the greatest fights and moments in anime in general. I just feel like it could have hit harder if it had some more space to breathe, and if Gege made some different decisions. And don't get me wrong, I love this show. It's why I've probably already talked about this show 2 times longer than most anime in this video. But sometimes the more you love something, the more obvious its flaws become. If you ever took a step back and really looked at the plots of most sports anime, they're all really samey. The main character's team starts off as a major underdog and loses a crushing defeat in the winter season. But then some senpais come back and everyone goes through their training arcs so that the team can make a generational comeback in the spring tournament. And the reason this structure is used is because it works. But when so many of these anime feel so similar, it kinda gets tiresome. I'm a pretty athletic guy. I've been running track for honestly my whole life. So when they describe the zone in Kuroko no Basket, I literally get what that means because I've been there before. All of that is to say is that I love sports anime, and Ping Pong the animation quickly became my favorite because it challenged the status quo of the genre. And it's kind of crazy how out of all the anime in this genre, the one about a sport I seriously have the faintest clue about has the most realistic depiction of high school sports to me. High school sports are a lot like Discord Nitro. You pay with your blood, sweat, tears, and countless hours put into honing your ability. And in return for all of your dedication, you get nothing. Because 200 other kids are putting in the exact same work as you, but they have more natural talent. With D1 being a far-fetched dream, you constantly think of quitting. But quitting also doesn't seem right because you've been playing this sport for most of your life. This is the exact dilemma that Hoshino faces. The story follows him and his childhood friend, Tsukimoto, who is that one kid who's stupidly talented. But he's also disillusioned with ping pong, as the only reason he's stuck with it is because he's good at it. It's only when they play each other do they realize that they both play simply because it makes them feel alive. The show as a whole has great writing and animation, but it also seriously does this genre justice, and I really love it for that. Imagine being so good that your influence over an entire genre can be felt decades later. I honestly don't know whether I should hate or love Mushoku Tensei. It presents a story and adventure so captivating that it never fails to leave the audience with a sense of childlike wonder. But at the same time, it's also the direct cause for D-tier isekai, the greatest evil in this world. All of those low to mid-tier isekai saw what Mushoku Tensei was able to accomplish, but they tried to emulate it without adding any of the substance that made this show so special. This show is expertly written, between the small household dramas of Bueno Village to one of the greatest adventure tales in anime. But more than anything else, this show is really the ultimate isekai. Unlike a lot of low tiers, it utilizes the isekai premise in a way that is less like a crutch and more like a vehicle for characterizing characterization. Rudius unlearns his past disgusting behavior and just changes so much in general because of his new environment that it feels more like a character metamorphosis. Like season 2 was wild. At first I was lukewarm with it. I was like, what does the show come to when we're getting the erectile dysfunction arc? But now that the season is finished with the second core fully out, it might have just given us the most extreme character development we've ever seen. Rudius genuinely goes from a one night stand beta cuck to a fully grown alpha Chad with 2 wives and a child. Oh, and by the way, Sophie on top. I will die on this hill. It is true. Mushoku Tensei is the ultimate isekai. It created the tropes that so many other shows abuse, but the best isekai story, in my opinion, goes to Re:Zero. Re:Zero can't be the ultimate isekai because it's so unlike any other isekai. Where most isekai act as an escapist fantasy for its audience, Re:Zero is not. If you self-insert into Subaru, find help. Subaru is your typical weeb who gets transported to an idealized fantasy world, but then you see the plot and get hit with the sudden realization that you're not supposed to self-insert into Subaru, and you shouldn't idolize this world because it's kind of fucked up in a lot of places. Subaru is one of my favorite protagonists in anime, and I guess it's actually a hot take because I was showing my friend Re:Zero and she actually stopped watching it because she found Subaru to be such an insufferable douche in the middle part of season 1. And yeah, honestly, she's not wrong. A lot of the shit that he does around this part of the story is just straight up asshole behavior. But what I did that she didn't was look at it from his perspective. Subaru is a guy who has died in some of the most psychologically and physically horrifying ways. Not even getting injured or traumatized. Fucking dying. If you could go through everything Subaru went through and still be a fully mentally stable, non-selfish good Samaritan, you must just be built different. Although most of us, including Subaru, aren't. And by season 2, Subaru still ends up being an incredibly likable character. The writing from the huge cast of characters to all the mindfucky return by death situations was impeccable. I kid you not when I say that you'll appreciate this show more and more the more times you rewatch it. I've rewatched it 2 times, and I'm sure if I ever decide to rewatch it a 3rd time, I'll pick up even more details that I missed on the first 3. While Mushoku Tensei is the best isekai in the truest sense of the word, Re:Zero is the greatest story that just happens to be an isekai, if that makes any sense. Kaguya-Sama has been the most consistently funny anime I've ever watched, but even if the anime is focused a lot on just telling structurally well put together jokes, Kaguya-Sama also sold me on one of the greatest romances to ever grace anime. It's one of those hyper rare shows that keeps getting better as the episodes go on. I love season 2 more than season 1, and I absolutely adore season 3 over season 2. But it's not just the jokes that get funnier or the romance that gets more romancy. The show starts out wielding its power premise that the author just drives home with honestly just objectively funny moments. If you don't know, the premise of this anime is that the top 2 students at a prestigious high school are secretly in love with each other. But neither of them want to confess their love, so they each try to play tricks on each other to try and make the other one confess first. And this is all through their absolutely over the top antics. And that's what this show is about in the beginning. But then it evolves, and it's clear that Aka isn't just a funny author, but also one that's capable of truly great writing. I mean, we've seen it also in Oshinoko. And it's the fact that there are some serious character-defining moments that are surrounded by goofy antics that just amplifies its effect. And it just makes it hit harder. The same could be said about the romance. Overall, Kaguya-Sama is the best comedy, at least for me, but it's also not just a comedy. This is a show that will make you feel every emotion when you watch it, and I think it's truly special for that. Psycho-Pass is a classic, and if you haven't watched it, please do. Y'all have slept on this show for long enough, but hold up. Let me sell it to you. This show lives in this insane dystopia where everyone lives under the Sybil system, which is this preposterously complex algorithm that attempts to calculate a civilian's bad intentions and puts it into numerical form. The psychopath is a person's quantified criminality, and if it's over a certain threshold, law enforcement are goaded into killing on sight. Akane is a new police officer who, much like everyone else, has a rigid sense of justice. The philosophy of this world might seem fucked up to us, but everyone in this verse has been indoctrinated into thinking that the Sybil system is absolute, that good and bad are as simple as black and white. But it takes one single mission to go tragically in the wrong direction for Akane to start doubting the authority of the Sybil system. The first time I knew I was watching peak was when the main villain first gets introduced. He is cold. He's like Johan, but like a sci-fi version. The whole reason why he's such a scary villain is that the Sybil system can't read his intentions. He's a complete and utter mystery, even to the psychopaths. And as Akane and every other character face off against this monster, they progressively grow more and more suspicious of the Sybil system. He's a villain whose motives are unclear the entire show, but he drags the entire cast through a wild goose chase where at the end, his motives become understood by all. I did hear that this got a season 2, but I heard it is trash, so I never really bothered with it. First season left me satisfied, to be honest. Yu Hakusho is a series that to me is defined by its peaks. You got the Dark Tournament arc, which is basically the grandfather of the modern shonen tournament arc, and then the fights are seriously some of the best in the business. Like, this absolute demon Togashi knows how to just write the most gripping and engaging fights. Like, out of my top 5 favorite fights from anime, 3 of them come from Togashi, like genuinely. Although upon rewatch, I think that there are a lot of slow, fillerish type of stretches of episodes, but they're not even real filler because they're canon to the manga. That's mostly towards the beginning of the show though. Maybe it was the case that Togashi wasn't certain on where exactly he wanted to take the story, so he fucked around and found out for the first couple of chapters. And it doesn't kill the show or anything, it's still thoroughly enjoyable. It's probably my favorite shonen from this era, and I will say that Yusuke is my close second favorite shonen protagonist in general. I just love everything the show does with him, and his personality is so entertaining to watch. The show also has a sick cast of side characters too. I've always liked jazz. Whether it be this fast-paced musical roller coaster that's just this wild, chaotic jumble of notes, or a more concentrated, slow, mellow jazz piece. For as long as I could remember, I've always appreciated the genre, from Miles Davis to Chet Baker to Whiplash to Blue Giant? Wait a second, this got an anime? So Blue Giant is a manga, one that I've always heard its name being tossed around in circles I'm in, but there's always been this hesitation with me picking it up, and that's not a hesitation that's unique to Blue Giant. It's specifically manga that have this type of plot, that either have to do with musicians or just anyone that has a passion for music as a whole. It always seemed like the lamest thing in the world to me to read something about people that obsess over their music and perfecting their craft, but when it comes time for them to actually perform the song that culminates everything they've worked for, we don't hear it. It quite literally is just music notes drawn on top of character sprites. So when I saw that Blue Giant got an adaptation, a movie to be more specific, I was excited. And it was, well, how do I find the right words? I feel like the strongest point that the movie was trying to get across was that it had a budget of 100 Monopoly dollars. Okay, I'm obviously exaggerating, and I usually don't have as much of a CGI hate boner as other people, but emphasis on usually. Since in this particular case, the CGI is not even used to just cut corners. It's used to straight up just animate almost half of the movie. But even with my severe grievances with the budget, there's a reason I still put this so high on the list. the important parts they nail on the head. CGI isn't going to detract from a great storyline and some amazing characters that are just an utter joy to follow. I also want to give the studio some props too. This doesn't feel like a production that just wanted to take advantage of an amazing IP and cheaply spin it into an anime for a quick buck. This feels like a passion project coming from a studio that never really had much capital to begin with. One of the things that sold me on the quality of this adaptation was a scene near the beginning of the movie. But first, Blue Giant has a rather simple premise. It's just about these youngsters who all happen to be 18 years old who form a jazz band, and they dream of playing in the most prestigious jazz club in Tokyo. But every band has to start somewhere. Their first recital is not the greatest, and one of the things I appreciate the most in the scene is how the soundtrack takes into account every single mistake and flaw within the band's performance. And speaking of the soundtrack, if you're a fan of jazz, you'll love it. Full stop. The whole production just emanates a love of jazz. The shots all feel deliberate, the wild, exaggerated gestures and aerodynamic style of play makes jazz seem fun, seem alive, which is actually one of the core themes that the show presents, since jazz is kind of a dying genre. Constantly throughout the show, we are hinted at the fact that a newer and younger style of jazz is what's needed to resurrect it. And our main crew just so happens to represent a newer and younger style of jazz. I love this movie a lot, and now I actually kind of really want to read the manga now. Imagine the game you have the most hours on. If the hours don't have 4 digits, then this number is most likely an order of magnitude smaller than the number of hours I put into every single video. Before starting this channel, I've always felt like I was a fairly normal, mentally stable guy, but now it doesn't take a doctor to take one glance at my channel and diagnose me with like 27 different things. And I think this is the reason I fell in love with Blue Period. This feels like a weird anime to talk about, because as a guy that doesn't care much for the fine arts, and as a guy whose magnum opus is a stick figure doodled in class with dicks substituted in for limbs, the show shouldn't leave that much of an impact on me. But it did. Because this show is about a kid who throws away everything to pursue his newfound passion, which is something that really anyone can get behind. Financially speaking, pursuing a career in the arts might be the single greatest career path if you're passionate about your job at McDonald's. But he does it anyways because he wants to, and watching Iguchi dive into his passion headfirst with so much at stake was something I always came back for week after week. It was truly a reflective experience, and it's not just artsy kids or people that have some insane outlandish passion that I think would enjoy this. I truly think that anyone can easily find something to like with this show. If not the passion, it'll be the incredibly likable characters or the great job the show does in conveying the process of art. And I mean, of course the show's description of the artistic process would be great because the show's coming from a mangaka and these guys literally draw like 24/7. So for this next section, I just want to do something a little special. So I actually have a presentation for you. It's why you should watch all these anime. So Record of Ragnarok got a lot of cool gods from Greek mythology, and there's a ton of really cool fights with them. But you know what's even better than that? Berserk, which is some of the best dark fantasy fiction out there. And of course we can't forget about Kingdom, which is the GOAT when it comes to long-form underdog stories. Overall, these are some really good anime that I'd recommend. And honestly, if you like what you're seeing on screen right now, I'd give these shows a chance. Because what I've been showing you were really the moments taken directly from the show that clearly way more time and budget was put in. So if you like my slideshow, you could hold your applause because I got another slideshow for you. Okay, real talk, I want to do an honorable mention section. and it's for a very specific set of shows. I know that this video is only about ranking anime, but I found that this limitation really hurts my ego in some places. Like, you're never gonna catch me putting Berserk in trash tier, no matter how bad the adaptations are. Like, it's still Berserk at the end of the day. I just physically cannot allow these shows to be bottom tier when their mangas are some of the best things I've ever seen. So this honorable mention goes to Berserk, Kingdom, Slam Dunk, and Record of Ragnarok. I will genuinely sell my soul to Satan if it means that any of these manga could get the Brotherhood treatment. So if you don't want to hear about manga at all and just want anime, you could skip to this timestamp. Yeah, so Berserk is one of the most influential and culturally transformative dark fantasy manga to ever come out. Think of it. Without Berserk, no Dark Souls, which means no Elden Ring and no Bloodborne. Without Elden Ring and Bloodborne, like, what are we even doing? What's the point in living? So Berserk means a lot to me, as you could see. But seriously, it has hands down the most beautiful artwork to ever grace manga, and a story that had an unprecedented effect on pop culture, and it's something that I'm sure will keep sending ripples for generations to come. Talking about the manga itself, I think Guts is up there as one of the most compelling protagonists out there. He's a deep character who's so much more than just a brooding lone wolf carrying a hunk of iron. Griffith is just flat out one of my favorite villains of all time. And on that topic, Berserk depicts and handles scenes with mature themes in a way that is so uniquely nuanced. The world is this grim, twisted medieval fantasy that is enthralled with these layers of dark ancient evils. And overall, Guts and the events of Berserk set the stage for one of the greatest revenge stories ever told. But then Miura, the author of Berserk, died. And first of all, rest in peace to an absolute GOAT. It was over 2 years ago now, but he will still be always remembered. But his story, with a third of its runtime never being completed, leaves us with a bittersweet taste in our mouth. But that's actually not true. Berserk has been getting a consistent stream of chapter releases done by Miura's friend. And I'm not saying that they're bad, I'm just saying that they're not Miura. Its artwork is probably as good as it can be, and the same could be said about the storyline, but the dialogue just doesn't feel right. But to be completely honest, even if Miura stayed alive for longer, I think Berserk would still remain unfinished. He was a man that was obsessed with perfection, and for the most part, perfection is a lifelong endeavor. Okay, this next one coming up is probably the one series I was the most excited to get into for this entire list. Why, you ask? Well, I could tell you about the absolutely impeccable reputation it has in its fan base, or its infamy for being the pinnacle of a certain subgenre. But I just want to show you the art, the attention to detail, the action that is drawn so fluidly that movement on this still image feels animated. It's Slam Dunk. And if you're curious, the reason I was so hyped for this, because it's penned by the living, breathing god himself, Takehiko Inoue, the same deity responsible for Vagabond. So Slam Dunk is a basketball manga, and I was seriously overjoyed that this had an anime adaptation so I could put it on this list. But that's it. There's simply no chance I'm giving up the opportunity to read Peak to watch the fucking Slam Dunk anime. Who do you think I am? I don't even need to watch it to know that it doesn't capture the same artistic and narrative genius of Inoue. So what makes this the king of sports anime? Well, the answer is not actually very apparent in the first 20 chapters or so. That a lot of people, including myself, consider to be incredibly slow because Inoue wrote this in the 90s while trying to appeal to a Japanese audience. So understandably, he felt the need to really start at square one to explain the basics of the basics. As an American with a skin tone about the same color as charcoal, I was practically birthed with the modern basketball culture and rules burned into my mind. So when Inoue introduced the protagonist of a supposed basketball manga, and he doesn't know what dribbling a ball is, I thought I was in for a very tedious read. But much to my surprise, most of Inoue's controversial decisions in this manga end up making me enjoy it that much more. So take for instance Sakuragi. He's never played or even seen a basketball game be played. The only reason he joins in the first place is because of a girl he likes, and looking from the outside, this kind of setup seems
really miscalculated. There's a reason that virtually every sports anime has an ultra motivated seasoned athlete to star in the show. It simply just complements this style of show the most, since if the protagonist doesn't care about the game, then how would we, the audience, find it in us to give a shit about anything that's going on? But what I think I learned to appreciate is how when Sakuragi grows to love the sport, we as the audience see that childlike wonder in his eyes and grow to love it as well. Obviously I liked basketball before Slam Dunk, but it's like a rekindled flame, you know? And since we're on the track of making comparisons to other sports anime, I want to point out something that I really only noticed after reading Slam Dunk. I don't care about Isagi, I don't care about Kuroko or Ayomi or Kisei, and I don't care about any of the characters in Haikyuu off the court. For all of these examples, while they're locked in and playing whatever sport, they're always mad interesting to watch, but immediately outside of the court or the field, we're reminded that these characters are seriously just personality-less husks a lot of the times, that the author stuffed with some type of gimmick on the court and expected them to walk on their own 2 feet while having interactions that aren't about sports. Like, yeah, sure, Bachira has a monster coming inside of him, but what does that actually mean for his character? It means a string of backstories that I'm really not a fan of. So finally getting back to my point, the characters in Slam Dunk are actually just people I care about, not just athletes I care about, with interesting personalities that are seamlessly weaved into the playstyle of every character. I went to this read thinking I'd first be captivated by the godsend art, but it ended up being the characters. Just saying, I haven't finished it. I'm about 120 chapters in, so try not to spoil it in the comments. For people that want to get into it but are hesitant to because of the start, I'd say just do a speed read for the first 20 chapters or so. Then I really start to love the series by literally the first game, which is about like chapter 25, I think. So Kingdom is one of those One Piece types of series where you look at it from the outside, see the amount of chapters is in the triple digits, and then you also see the 8, and then you're just like, no thank you. And I absolutely understand that mindset because I was also extremely reluctant to get into it. But seriously, by about 30 chapters or so, I was so glad that this shit had 800 chapters. I genuinely never wanted it to end. Kingdom is about an insignificant boy living in the era of China's warring states, at a time when the country was sectioned off into several different territories that were perpetually engaged in warfare. The manga is actually surprisingly accurate in a historical sense, but that's just the bigger picture. If you're a scholar in Chinese history, this story wouldn't be ruined for you because Hara is able to expertly portray this historical event while adding some necessary details to make sure the story is comprehensive. Shin is just a war orphan of no esteemed background who eventually makes great friends with the Prince of Qin, which is one of the states in the warring China. And the story first follows these two as they struggle to find their place inside their own state. But it's kind of like Hunter x Hunter, where we spend so much time with a countless number of arcs taking place in the mainland, then suddenly we're thrusted with the exciting revelation that the mainland that everything happened on was just a tiny island sandwiched in between an entire continent of mysteries. When Shin and Sei, who is the prince, do establish themselves within their own state, we're given that same sort of excitement when the audience realizes that there are still 6 other territories of similar or greater power that the characters have to overcome. I find it really hard to express my sheer love for this manga, but I think a lot of it has to do with Shin and Sei. Shin dreams to become a great general under the heavens, and Sei dreams to finally unify the warring states after a long 200 years of fighting. Shin may seem generic at first as a block-headed main character with big dreams, but over time you see this orphaned kid really turn into a man who can truly back up his dreams with his own strength after overcoming a countless number of bloody wars and battles. Then you might turn and look and see Sei's background as a prince to a territory as large as like half of Europe and think he might be some spoiled entitled brat, but he himself might be as much of an underdog as Shin for reasons that are pretty much spoilers. But he also has to triumph over conflicts, whether it be internal political strife, military decisions, or just the drama of trying to rule over such a polarized state. Also, one of my favorite things about Kingdom is just seeing every general in action. In One Piece, Luffy wants to find the One Piece, but there's obviously no precedent for anyone who's actually found it and achieved Luffy's goal who's still alive. But in Kingdom, Shin, for his whole military career, works directly under the generals that he aspires to be as he examines their strategies and actions. My point is that Shin's goal is tangible.
and close enough that he could actually study these generals. Yet, at the same time, despite the close proximity, his goal always seems so far away. And this distance is created by just showing us how damn cool every general is. And it's frankly a testament to Hara's sheer intelligence that he himself can write characters so damn smart. Like, a ton of people compare battles and war as just a strategist on each side playing an overcomplicated game of chess. But this is beyond that. These bitches are playing 8D chess. They constantly come up with strategies that take into account terrain, resources, and honestly ideas so out of the box that it just casually redefines what warfare even meant at the time. But not every general plays the same exact game. Some of them just lead the charge straight into the enemy and just win because they're that much of a force to be reckoned with. And others are so familiar with war that they genuinely just rely on their instincts while commanding their force of over 100,000 men. And then others have all three traits. I just really love this manga. If I already didn't make that clear, please read it. You will be doing yourself a favor, trust me. I've been a Record of Ragnarok fan for like 3 years now. I've been caught up with the manga for the entire 3 years, so I think I'm qualified to say that as a community, we don't know what the fuck y'all talking about when y'all saying this shit got an anime adaptation. It just straight up does not exist. Okay, no, for real, Record of Ragnarok is an insanely straightforward, insanely targeted piece of fiction. Just full stop, if a life and death tournament arc between God and man doesn't sound cool to you, then this series isn't for you. The whole show is basically just fights, but it's so damn impressive how much they manage to accomplish in each fight. Each one tells their own story and builds upon its own stakes. It really made me rethink the question of what makes a great fight. Is it how big and muscular each competitor is, or is it something more nuanced? Because I genuinely confused myself with organizing this list. Like, how could I possibly justify giving Record of Ragnarok a better writing score than like 3/4 of all the anime on this list if it's literally just one big tournament arc? And then I realized that fights are much more about storytelling than it is a dick measuring contest. The way this manga allows us to get attached to these characters through their stories, and then suddenly one of them is dead because someone has to lose the fight, it's not something that you'd expect to make you feel these strong emotions, but it does. It's also so cool to see all the references to gods and famous figures who battle it out, and how they're all given their own fresh personalities and weapons. Like, genuinely, even if you hail from any of the religions showcased in this series, I feel like you'd still fuck with these interpretations. Hell, I was raised Christian, and I blew my load reading Adam vs. Zeus. My favorite fights are Adam vs. Zeus, Buddha versus 7 Lucky Gods, and then Jack the Ripper versus Hercules. Not to say any of the other fights are bad, honestly, all of them are great. It's just that these ones were the standouts. So Monster is about Tenma, who has saved countless lives through his successful career as a surgeon. But this story is about one of those lives he saved that he ultimately regretted. Johan is a boy, but as Tenma sees it, he's a pure evil monster. A psychopath, a savior, the Antichrist. Johan is a lot of things to a lot of people. But to Tenma, and by extension the audience, he's someone who indiscriminately leaves death in his wake. Monster is one of the most well-written psychological mysteries I've ever witnessed. It's a cat and mouse tale of epic proportions that always leaves us wondering if that Nietzsche quote will come true. In his journey trying to kill monsters, does Tenma become one himself? Monster is a very slow-paced, dramatic story, but slow-paced doesn't equal bad. Sometimes it feels like people confuse slow-paced with nothing happening. Some stories out there definitely suffer with the plot just not progressing at all, but Monster's plot is a consistently paced marathon. That's why I call it slow-paced. Absolutely 10 out of 10 writing, and Johan is a peak villain. Although if you came here looking for some gory nuts to butts action, Monster is not where you should look. Silent Voice was the show that was really the first to convince me that the— Do you guys get the joke? It might take a while. The joke is that the movie is called A Silent Voice. So this is a very important section to me because I'm not a crier. Let's get that out of the way. So I usually am not a fan of the anime where it feels like the entire incentive around finishing it is because it feels like you're supposed to cry at the end. You might call it cheap tear bait, but I personally call them hollow onions because you cut into them, cry, but only after do you realize that there was never any substance on the inside. And don't get me wrong, if a piece of media makes you cry, if it was able to stimulate such strong emotions, then it had to be doing something right for you. That's why I think these things are very subjective. Like me personally, when I was watching Plastic Memories, I'd just be AFK for a couple episodes until what felt like a teleprompter on the side notifying me that this is a cry scene. Although Silent Voice stands apart from all of those fake feeling shows, it tells a story that feels real, a little bit too real in some places. The movie tells the story of Shoya, who is the callous bully of a helpless deaf girl named Shoko. And you may be asking about why in the world you would ever want to root for this guy as the protagonist, because from what I'm describing, he's just a menace. But people change, people grow up. Shoya realizes that what he did in the past was objectively fucked up, and the only thing he wants to do is to make amends. This is one of those pieces of anime that while watching it, you just get the feeling that something like this couldn't have been pulled off in any other medium. The production is downright beautiful from top to bottom. It does the best job in tackling the themes of anxiety, depression, and self-hatred that I've ever seen. And I teared up watching this film. And this doesn't seem like a huge thing to say about a movie that people very commonly cry to. But trust me, this takes on a whole different meaning when someone like me admits that. Because A Silent Voice, when I first watched it, took the second ever spot of pieces of media to make me cry. The other is a manga I might talk about in the future. But anyways, at the end of the day, this film isn't perfect. It really struggles with tying in all the B plots and even has some very minor plot holes. Although I think this is the type of media where its flaws make it all the more charming as a standalone watch. This anime will never not be a major part of me, and I can't recommend it enough. Chainsaw Man is a show I absolutely cheated on when making this list. So when I first drew up the psychopathic idea for this video, as you know, I intended to only take into account the animes of the show because I didn't want every single comment to just be, oh, why is blank ranked like that? If your illiterate cotton picking ass could read, you place it first because everyone knows the manga is better. Although I literally could not bear it with Chainsaw Man. Chainsaw Man was kind of fucked by the anime, and not because of a lot of reasons that people online think. Yeah, sure, the anime never really came close to capturing the stylized, almost psychedelic artwork of Fujimoto, and the CG is a little jarring at times. Although I think the real thing that killed this show is the fact that it only got 12 episodes. I will never come to understand this shit. Part 1 of Chainsaw Man was literally the perfect length for a clean 24 episode season 1 that just completely finishes part 1 and sells everyone on the show. So I ranked Chainsaw Man taking into account all of part 1. I'm just too much of a fan. Throw your tomatoes or curse me out if you want, but trust me, this video will age well. Listen, all I'm gonna say is that when season 2 comes out and all the crazy shit starts to go down, no one's gonna know who the fuck Gojo is anymore. Everyone will still be barking for Makima. Actually, talking about the show for a second, the reason we love Chainsaw Man is not even because of the cool devils or peak art style. I mean, obviously, of course, that's part of it, but mainly it's because of Denji. Usually shonen protagonists represent some sort of larger-than-life figure that always has a seemingly insurmountable goal. But Denji doesn't have an insurmountable goal, and he isn't larger than life. Of course, he does have anime superpowers, but from my perspective, a horny broke teenager whose life goal is to find a girlfriend doesn't seem larger than life to me. We love Denji because he's just a normal kid with shit morals. Everything else is just extra. Also, everything with the devils is just the coolest thing in the world to me. Chainsaw Man is something I've never seen before. It's like Fujimoto is inviting us to experience his own acid trip. And that sounds facetious, but I literally do not have any clue how else to describe it. You know those things that just combine the best of both worlds? Things you truly can't hate, like mixed babies. Everyone loves mixed babies. Cowboy Bebop combined jazz, science fiction, action, and a main character who low-key doesn't give a fuck all into one show. When I was 14 watching this, I could swear on my mama with God as my witness that I just witnessed the height of media, the climax of fiction, the vertex of invention, something of impeccable perfection and too exquisite to exist. It was only after a little reflection that I was actually just describing my teenage opinion of Faye Valentine. So in all seriousness, this show has aged like fine wine. And to be completely honest, saying that you like Cowboy Bebop in the year of our Lord 2025 is like saying that you like the fact that you haven't been hit with an atomic bomb. As an anime fan, it's such an obvious opinion to have that you might as well just not say it. It's kind of wild actually, because I have a history of hating when shows do that episodic shit where the story would basically reset after the episode ends. But this show actually utilizes its episodic nature to its advantage. Since Spike is such an unconventional protagonist, he's less of a hero type of archetype and more of a vagabond, a drifter that just ends up in places and goes wherever the wind takes him. And it just so happens that the wind takes him to some of the most iconic places where he meets some of the most iconic characters, who are some of the most fun and entertaining bunch I've ever seen in the main cast. These guys could be sitting in a room jerking off for the entire episode and I'll still be thoroughly entertained, because they all just have great chemistry together. The action is crazy good. Characters be using anything in their environment to their advantage. Like, God forbid you put a coffee machine within a 4-mile radius of a Cowboy Bebop character. It's pretty much just clips at that point. And if you leave a mop next to one of them, you might just damn well get the best fight scene in the entire franchise. I love the original show, but the movie was something else. 10 out of 10. If you've seen the original but not the movie, please watch this thing. It's amazing. Anyways, Spike is genuinely one of my favorite protagonists out there. Like, this guy is cool, but he's also one-dimensional, who's just nonchalant for their entire existence. Spike is a chill dude, but it always seemed like that wasn't the full picture. It always seemed like he was running from someone or something. As it turned out, like it frequently does, he has been running away from his past, and by the end, he's finally forced to confront it. Music in anime is something that doesn't really get talked about as much as, say, animation. And that's always been pretty weird to me, since for me personally, there have been plenty of shows out there where 80% of the reason I'm there at all is for the soundtrack. Shinichiro Watanabe made Cowboy Bebop in 1998, and that was pretty cool. But then, 6 years later, Samurai Champloo came out, and everyone came to the realization that this guy was a real ass nigga. It immediately became the coolest anime on the block, because if Cowboy Bebop was like the physical embodiment of jazz, Samurai Champloo is like hip hop incarnate. And I kid you not, this show is not only home to my favorite soundtrack in all of anime, but also has my favorite opening and ending. I couldn't help but wonder how in the world Nujabes was able to craft a soundtrack that simply exists to cater specifically to my music taste. Rest in peace to a legend. But enough of all that. Music is important, especially when it's good, but it's not everything. The plot of Samurai Champloo revolves around these two wandering swordsmen who ends up in this girl's debt. And the whole show is just her dragging the two of them around everywhere as she looks for the samurai that smells of sunflowers. It's a setup that personally seemed way too overly simplistic and open to interpretation when I first watched the show. But ultimately, this simplicity ends up being to the show's benefit. All we know about this trio is that this guy's a horny Somalian badass, this dude low-key doesn't give a fuck, and this girl's lifelong goal is to track down some smelly dude. This simplicity gives the show so much room to breathe and just go wild and do whatever the hell it wants. Like, there's this one episode I vividly remember where Americans land on the shore of Japan, and mind you, this is during the Edo period. So all of this would be impossible because America didn't exist yet. So anyways, they basically do what you'd expect of a stereotypical American that looks like this. They challenge the Japanese to a baseball game with Japan's natural resources and land on the line. So after the Americans realize that the opposition got some powerhouses on their team, the Americans start to cheat by genuinely just murdering every Japanese player. And I just find it to be the funniest thing in the world that this is one of the death scenes.
Monzo is dead, but freedom will never die.
That's the insanity of this show. It has the tropey baseball episode that every anime has for some reason, but it chose to do it in the most mentally unhinged way I could have ever imagined.
But not only does this show have a great sense of humor, but it also has some of the coolest fight scenes I've ever seen in anime. The whole show is edited like a hosting DJ transitioning from song to song, except here it's from scene to scene. I absolutely adore this show. You could always leave it up to Watanabe to somehow find a way to combine the most random things together, but when those things become one unit, it quite literally turns into the best thing you've ever watched. Like, no other sane human would ever in a million years think this would be a good idea. Mixing urban vibes in hip-hop with Edo period samurai. It's ludicrous, but it was made by the one guy who can make it work in a big way. The year is 2024. The amount of isekai released on a seasonal basis has been growing exponentially. Literally. One day, I got possessed by a demon. Patrick Mahomes himself met me in my dreams and told me I had no choice but to watch every single isekai to ever come out. And I asked him if he could just send me straight to hell instead, but he didn't budge. Although I guess it wasn't all too bad. I woke up Monday, uploaded that video, and became the one and only person who could truly say that I've watched an entire genre of anime. But then Tuesday came around, and like 3 entire isekai shows just came out the same day. So I did it all for nothing. And after so many truly revolting pieces of fantasy medium that honestly started to feel like they were just getting copy and pasted, Frieren came along and dispelled my never-ending torment. It was a fantasy show that felt so fresh in the recent anime climate we've been getting. There's no need to add on tacky gimmicks to hook the audience because this show has the ability to do something amazing, something I haven't seen in eons. It has the ability to world build in a way that doesn't feel forced and isn't handicapped. And what I mean by handicapped is, have you ever wondered why there are so many isekai out there? Like, these isekai authors just see a perfectly good fantasy show and have the insatiable demonic urge to just make it shit, like an unboxing YouTuber at a funeral. They write isekai because it's pretty much like an easy mode for authors. They don't really have to worry about world building since the protagonist is in the same shoes as the audience. They have no experience in this world. And this is why Frieren is like the antimatter of isekai, since the show revolves around a character that has the most experience in this world. She's an elf mage who's lived for over 1,000 years, and her past memories with her journey with Himmel the hero functions as the sort of foundation of who she is. Frieren, the show, started out, in my opinion, extremely simple. Frieren and the gang just go from destination to destination, exploring the various facets of the world and encountering conflict on the way. Although the moment the show went from good to great was my personal favorite episode in the entire series, simply titled A Powerful Mage, an episode that cemented the world as one of my personal favorites in the entire genre of fantasy. If the episode still doesn't sound familiar to you, it's the one where Frieren gets possessed by low-tier god. Honestly, I really do want to make a full video on Frieren eventually. It seems like it's practically a rite of passage if you talk about anime on YouTube. But yeah, that's basically the gist of it. I fucking love this show to death. This is a show that has always been very close to me. Lelouch was genuinely my brother's entire personality until, you guessed it, he discovered One Piece. Send him prayers, he's been hospitalized ever since the hiatus was announced. So this show has famously been called Death Note but Mecha, which before I knew anything about this show, I'd always interpret as Death Note but worse. But similar to a lot of statements that anime fans make, this was grossly reductive and also just kind of wrong. The main similarity that people obviously see between the two shows is that Lelouch represents a morally gray smart guy who seeks to make change in the world. Similar to Code Geass, we see Light Yagami get closer to his goal through utilizing his sheer wit. And much like in Death Note, we see Lelouch stage, play, and get ensnared in these ultra twisted mind games that will have the audience always questioning who has the true upper hand in any given situation. But even after having said all of that, this comparison really just boils down to smart people doing smart things to reach a goal, which is about as vague of a relationship to draw as like astrology signs. So one thing that I absolutely will always love whenever a show does is letting the story follow two characters on completely perpendicular paths. Lelouch and Suzuku are childhood friends that both want change, but they go about it in completely different ways. The Holy Empire of Britannia is like a what if the British actually squashed any attempts at a revolution in the Americas? And while we may know that as the worst timeline, for everyone in the verse, it's reality. And Britannia is basically your stereotypical big bad evil regime, but it has that British monarchy aesthetic. Suzuku, a Japanese refugee, joined the Knights of the Round in order to get closer to the ruling class. Lelouch, the 17th prince, wants to tear it all down, and he uses his 9th level spell called Gias to attempt to overthrow the government. The way this power is utilized is so interesting. Basically, it's the power to control the actions of anyone he sees, and you can probably just imagine all the wild and creative ways this power could be weaved into the plot. Okay, one major criticism I do have to give for the show is how Gias is a lot of the time used as a brainless scapegoat for impossible situations. The most obvious and almost show-ruining example that I'm sure nobody is surprised I'm pointing out is...
For example, if I told you to kill all the Japanese, it wouldn't matter how you felt about it.
This is some Looney Tunes level writing that a lot of the time people acknowledge as being shit, but ignore it because they like the rest of the show. But to give context, basically it's the end of season 1. Virtually all the conflicts have been resolved, all the loose ends have been addressed, and a satisfying resolution was about to be reached, since one of the princesses of Britannia was about to make peace with Lelouch. But then, that shit happens. The writers genuinely backed themselves into a corner because of how neatly they were about to wrap things up for season 1, but then I guess they were just reminded of the fact that they had to make a season 2 and just pulled something directly out of their assholes. But here's the thing, Code Geass has one hell of a redemption arc. Season 2 is good. It's great. It's everything season 1 was, but better. But where the show really redeemed itself was the actual ending of the series, which is hands down the single best ending that an anime has ever gotten. I mean, I'm trying to think of some right now, but I honestly can't. Most anime don't even have endings at all. Good endings is even rarer. So that's why Code Geass will always be a classic. This shit is the shit. This shit was shitting before farts were even invented. This shit is Gurren Lagann. This anime turns boys into men. This show truly opens your third eye. You didn't think something this epic could exist, and you weren't expecting it either. But Gurren Lagann is just about the coolest thing I've ever seen. It's just about a mole kid and his flashy brother who dream of reaching the top of the world. This is a show that completely won over its audience, not by having amazing writing or a great plot, but it won us over with its heart. This show takes your ideas and your expectations just to say, fuck all that. The only idea that actually matters is feeling and spirit. This show speaks to you on an emotional level. It talks to your willpower, that adrenaline rush that overcomes you as you resolve to beat an impossible challenge. And it tells you to resolve harder, because nothing is truly impossible in this world. And as long as you live, you could forge your own destiny. The power of friendship is something I would, under normal circumstances, shit on anime for doing. When characters are clearly going to lose a fight, the outcome has basically been decided, and then boom. Flashback that rouses the audience's sympathy for the main cast of characters, and then they all get bullshit power-ups. So here's the main difference when Gurren Lagann does it. This show just does it cooler. I was genuinely trying to think of a justification for why I love it when Gurren Lagann does it versus when, say, Fairy Tail does it. But I think maybe the answer just comes down to the fact that it was already established that this show was basically just written based on vibes. The power of bros and friendship was etched into the core of the show from the very beginning. So you're not expecting some Game of Thrones level writing. Instead, you expect to see dudes who, under normal circumstances, have no right to dream, surpass every limitation and reach for the stars. And I just love this show for that. This show is absolutely fucking mental. I don't think I've ever seen a sci-fi show quite like this. And my immediate thought was that it had to be the title. I've been referring to this genre a lot, cyberpunk. But what does it actually mean and where does it come from? Well, take a look at Cyberpunk Edgerunners actually tells us a surprising amount about the genre as a whole. As you might already know, this is supposed to be a loose adaptation of Cyberpunk 2077, the game. But that game was actually heavily inspired by Cyberpunk the TTRPG from 1998. and keep that date in mind because it's important. This swell-looking guy named Mike Pondsmith was the man behind the TTRPG. And by the way, all a TTRPG is a tabletop role-playing game. If you're still not familiar, just think Dungeons and Dragons. But anyways, Mike Pondsmith originally decided to organize all his ideas in the form of a TTRPG because back in 1998, the type of media that he would have wanted to channel his concepts into weren't advanced enough. But that's actually kind of funny because Akira also came out in 1988, which is probably the most famous cyberpunk thing to ever release. It served to be physical and visual proof that this genre could be realized in something other than a TTRPG, or in the form of what started the cyberpunk genre, a novel. A novel that goes by the name of Neuromancer, a book that is largely credited as being the progenitor of the cyberpunk genre. At this point in 1984, a large majority of sci-fi works depict their futuristic worlds as essentially a utopia, or a straight-shot dystopia. And this is exactly why Neuromancer and the genre it would soon create would be so unthinkable. It established cyberpunk as being a more pessimistic, realist take on sci-fi. Cyberscapes tend to border on outright dystopias and are largely characterized by low-life high tech. The genre takes concepts like accelerated advancements in things like AI and cyberware, and then it smashes that together with societal dysfunction and poverty. And I think that's why this subgenre of sci-fi feels way more realistic to people, because it serves as a rejection that a perfect society or a perfectly imperfect society could ever exist. And this is why I think cyberpunk edgerunners immediately captured its audience. From frame one, we're introduced to this degenerate, gruesome world where deaths happen abruptly and where people inevitably lose themselves. This is Night City. The story follows David, who quickly strays from the path that his recently deceased mom set out for him. With the revelation that his body has a great affinity to cyberware, he becomes an edgerunner, which are basically hired militiamen who complete jobs whenever it's given to them. And it's really an unforgiving profession. One of the edgerunners literally gets his fade run over by some homeless dude pissing. But that doesn't bother David, because in his own words,
I'm built different.
So as this show goes on and we see David equip himself with more and more cyberware, we start to see his limits. You see, in this world, people who are consumed by the excessive cyberware they implant in themselves become what's known as a cyber psycho, and they usually go on killing rampages. David, in his hubris, thinks that he's immune to that sort of fate. But why? Just because he's the main character? That'd be like me picking up League of Legends and thinking I won't gain 300 pounds just because I've been skinny my entire life. Things just don't work that way. In many ways, cyberpunk edgerunners doesn't feel like anime. The main character actually gets with the girl in episode 3, the show somehow presents nudity in a way that doesn't feel like fan service, and the show overall just has this unfiltered, fast-paced, almost psychedelic style of storytelling. And I think that's part of the reason I love this show to death. It's not pandering to any audience like so many anime nowadays do, it's just being itself. Studio Trigger could literally burn my house down, steal everything I own and my cat, and I would still forgive them. Because they cooked so hard with this adaptation, everything down to the art style, the raw animation, and also the cinematography, they did perfectly. The score on this show is just absolutely perfect. Listen, I'm not even a big fan of heavy metal or even regular metal, but the tracks on this show just fit one-to-one with its vibe. From a production standpoint, Edgerunners is honestly a 10 out of 10. Everything else is a 9 out of 10, with my only criticism being that it feels a little bit too fast-paced in certain parts. Evangelion is the worst show in this tier. The story is simply not up to par. The issues I have with it extend and vary about as much as the sheer amount of plot holes, needless jargon, and assholes that the show frequents. Yeah, so Gendo Kari, you've done a bunch of heinous shit. Made yourself the captain of the 13 Court Guard squad of deadbeat dads in anime, and you also tried to literally vaporize all life in existence on planet Earth. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, why do all this? The Human Instrumentality Project has always been an insidious preordained prophecy. As long as the Tree of Life, the 13th Angel, and the poop stains on my diaper all reach singularity, the central dogma has essentially already accomplished its ultimate purpose.
Bro, respectfully, you're not gonna get away with killing the entire population by using big words.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I had no hand in any of this.
Oh, so you're denying your own genocide?
I plead the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay, obviously none of this happened in the show, but the fact that I can imagine this being an actual conversation in the show, hell, I don't even need to imagine, because the characters actually talk like this. What happened to Ava Unit 1? It seemed like the electromagnetic hybridization field over the left nipple has left Ava Unit 1 vulnerable to penetration. What? But let me give credit where credit is due, because Evangelion is known for a lot of things. First of all, it's arguably one of the most influential anime to ever anime. Like, it's crazy how widespread this shit actually became at the time compared to others. And secondly, the show had a huge hand in the popularization of mecha anime. But I may be tripping, because why do I not see any similarity between this and this? Well, in Evangelion, I'd actually argue that the mechas are actively the least interesting thing about the show. Of course, it's eye-catching, and of course, that's probably the reason you got into Eva in the first place, but the reason you stayed is surely for another reason. You see, I opened up this section shitting on a number of issues the show has for one extremely deliberate reason. It was to cover up the fact that I'm a pretentious asshole about this show. I think it was a measured, calculated decision to have these characters spouting nonsense. I think it was intentional to have seemingly random religious symbolism thrown around everywhere. And I think the lore is actually pretty cool. You see, it all just depends on perspective. I got it instantly. Hideaki Anno is shouting to us. This is what this show is about. The crushing weight of expectations, the depressing effects of the weight of expectations. And then there's the absurdity around everything that's happening to us. Killing angels that look like devils, characters with intentions that don't make sense. It makes you want to laugh at how ludicrous and absurd the world has become, because nothing makes any sense. Nobody makes sense. Shinji is our protagonist, so I wouldn't say it'd be a reach to say that we experience this story from the perspective of him. So when characters say things that are indecipherable or events happen that are unthinkable, we see the same scenes as Shinji does, and we share in his confusion and powerlessness. People who say that Ava is confusing are missing the point. The pseudoscientific bullshit, the man-made Avas, the conspiracy of the organization, the human instrumentality, the Dead Sea Scrolls, all of it was just made up on the spot. Evangelion is such a human story. It bends to the whims of whatever it felt in the moment, and it just does whatever it wants, because all of this is just a mirage, an illusion, to keep us from the point of it all, the characters. In many ways, every character reflects some sort of deep-seated flaw in another. Shinji directs so much inwards, the pressure of being the one safeguard for humanity. All that terrifying expectation is concentrated inwards. Asuka is precisely the opposite. Her mannerisms and personality and everything about her just screams, "Look at me." Her immense pressure to be perfect is weighed in outwardly achievements, and it quickly begins to eat at her. Rei contrasts with both Shinji and Asuka simultaneously because she feels no expectations, to the point where she doesn't really even have a sense of self and completely neglects to take care of herself. Evangelion started off pretty weird, but then it got weirder, creepier, and even more nonsensical, but that's fine because it was always about the characters. And then this shit happened.
Congratulations! Congratulations! Congratulations.
Yeah, so to be completely honest, I only liked one out of the 3 endings Ava got, and that one ending is End of Evangelion. Don't worry, we'll talk about the rebuilds in a minute, but what I want to focus on is one of the most puzzling movies I've ever watched. People love this movie. They love it a lot, and honestly, it confused me a lot. From doubling down on the weird pseudoscientific jargon to accelerating the presence of these sort of cryptic character motivations, and then it also just ends abruptly. Everyone dies, and Shinji has to live with the regret of starting the third impact. This movie had the setup to be absolutely hated because just like in the original, nothing is explained, and the literal ending is this downright strange and unconventional conclusion from a storytelling standpoint. But I think it works. Hideaki Anno makes it work. He was able to connect everything he wanted to say. Nerve HQ being invaded by other humans foreshadows the fact that man's greatest enemy is man. Shinji's perceived greatest enemy isn't the angels, it's others.
other people who won't acknowledge him or help him. But it quite literally takes everyone he's ever loved dying and the entire world crashing down for him to realize that his greatest enemy isn't actually anyone around him. So that only means one thing. It has to be himself. It's the same concept as what the last couple of episodes of the original anime were trying to convey. This time, it's just presented more eloquently. But then hey, we're not done yet. The rebuilds happened, and I absolutely love that they happened. It was so great to see old classic Eva be given a fresh modern coat of paint. Shiro Sagasu got back on site to cook up some of the best movie soundtracks I've ever heard. 1.0 was just mostly a retelling of the first half of the original anime, and while it's great as a standalone production, there's not much to actually talk about since it's virtually the same material. 2.0 is where it gets spicy, and it may very well be my favorite in the entire trilogy. We immediately start seeing changes. The first one I'll immediately point out is Mari, which is actually one of my biggest criticisms of the entire movie series. Out of the 3 teenagers in the main cast of the original, Shinji, Asuka, and Rei, all of them felt equal, and they mattered equally to each other. The narrative dynamic that these 3 had was almost perfect. And then there's Mari. And look, she's a fun character, and I literally thought she was a great concept too. Actually, if we're just talking about this movie, she's great, full stop. But ultimately, she's grossly underutilized and one of the biggest disappointments of the rebuilds, to be honest. So 2.0 ends with Shinji fucking up at an almost incomprehensible scale. 2.0 is a lot like End of Eva, and I think that's why I liked it so much. But this time, we will have a glimpse into what happens post Third Impact. There's a lot to love, but there's also a lot to hate with 3.0. On one hand, I really hate how a lot of the fights play out in this movie. They're on a spaceship now, if you don't know. And a lot of these fights are just these boring spaceship battles. And it felt like in this movie specifically, we've been getting way too much nonsense where the characters will just be yapping about some random overcomplicated science words they just made up. And it's just shit that's going into one ear and going out the other. There's also the fact that this movie is practically a reskinning of 2.0. It plays out pretty much the same that it does in 2.0, but this time he joins the dark side. So surprise, Shinji catastrophically fucks up again. And get this, he starts a 4th impact. Whoa. But I don't hate this movie. It has its place in the rebuild franchise, and it has some of the sickest imagery in any anime movie I've ever seen. Like, this is what the 4th impact looks like. Honestly, the most metal shit I've seen in my life. And that's why it's been my laptop wallpaper for the better part of 2 years. Also, this movie isn't completely derivative of 2.0, since there's actually a huge difference between Shinji's fuck up in the past compared to his fuck up now. This time, it's completely his fault. So that begs the question, how do you forgive yourself when you've done something so unforgivable? Enter 4.0. Something I considered just a downright beautiful movie, from Rei's entire character arc to one of the best depictions of depression I've ever seen in Shinji. But then, I rewatched 4.0. Twice, actually. And I'm not gonna lie, every single time I rewatched it, I've grown more and more contemptuous of its ending. I think this ending is actually very analogous to the original show's ending, where the characters just talk out their problems inside Shinji's mind. Although this time the main conflict is between Shinji and his father, and they talk out their problems. I like it better than the original, but I also don't like it. I think Evangelion is a great show that is rightfully hated. It's not for everyone. But I think that at the end of the day, there's a message we could all learn from this show. That life is like a wiener. It may be up, it may be down, but it's never hard forever.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I poured so many hours into. Hold up. Who said we're done here? This is just the start. It's time. The order of these next 10 shows are something I've pondered on and on about, because each of these 10 represent the pinnacle of the medium of anime, and their quality differs by a razor-thin margin. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Untouchable 10. But before that, you already know what I'm about to say. Thanks for tuning in until now, and if you've gotten this far, you might as well subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you want to support these ultra high effort videos. Multivariable calculus is a difficult course for many reasons. Not only because it introduces functions that can take multiple variables as inputs, but also because it just inserts an entirely new dimension to the subject. Literally. Graphs in 3 dimensions are hard to grasp. More than 3, and it starts to get mind-bending. So in order to have an easier time analyzing them, we simply project them onto the 2D plane. And the reason I even bother explaining any of this nerdy stuff is because I think it's extremely analogous to avatars. In the age of social media, we as a society are obsessed with our avatars, the 2D representation of us that we intentionally feed into the online algorithms, so that people only see the perfect side, the funny side, or the wholesome side of you. You are a 3D person who chooses to flatten yourself so that your projected 2D self may be more digestible to others. Hell, even this channel is an avatar. I am not talking to you right now. I'm reading off a pre-prepared script, and the real me is probably out on a run or stressed as shit studying for final exams or something. And that's just how it is. But what happens when there's a disconnect between your projected avatar and your real self? This is the story of Perfect Blue, and why I found it to be such a harrowing film. Mima, our main protagonist, is the cornerstone of an idol group that actually has a decent following. Although in the opening scene, she announces that she'll be leaving the group so she can pursue a career in acting. And to a lot of people, they feel betrayed. But more importantly for now, it feels like a betrayal of herself. Like there's a prominent part of herself that refuses to let go. Although this part of her never stops becoming prominent. And eventually this metaphorical idol avatar starts to physically sabotage the original from moving forward. Although that doesn't completely halt her breakthrough in the industry, as her first acting gig involves the extremely infamous sexual assault scene that she has to film. And this filming, along with other gigs that force her into a more sexualized role, start to warp how people perceive her as a person. And this feeling of not being able to control the way that other people perceive her, and that perception becoming a reality, is the primal fear that starts to eat away at her. This is what I think Perfect Blue excels in conveying. The disorienting feeling of getting lost in other people's perception of you, which ultimately results in you losing grip on who you actually are as a person. And it's at this point in the movie where things start to get really confusing. Scenes and settings blend into each other. Mima can barely even recognize if she's on set or just living life. And eventually, he shows up. You see, from the first scene of the show to now, this character has not spoken a word of dialogue. Although through some absolutely masterful cinematography, we grasp everything we need to know about this man. He is a fanatic that is obsessed with Mima, but not the person, just the idea of her as an idol. Although through his stalking, he starts to realize that the person he idolizes and the person that exists in reality are two very different people. And upon this realization, he lashes out violently. This movie was made all the way back in 1998, and while some people use this film as evidence for Satoshi Kon predicting the age of social media, my personal thought is that he simply molded this film around the struggles of traditional celebrities. But as the years passed and technology grew, it started to seem like any ordinary person can become their own small celebrity. And that's why I think Perfect Blue is terrifying. And that's why I think it'll only get more terrifying as the years go on. Does anyone remember 2018? It's a year that's home to one of the biggest tragedies of our generation. And I swear to you, I can explain. But we just have to time travel back to 2007. The anime that gets people into anime may be different depending on who you ask, but to me, it's always been X-Arm.
Oh, shit. Actually, I meant Death.
So Death Note is my real go-to for putting people onto anime. It's one of the most iconic and influential pieces of television in the medium, but not for any of the reasons anime usually become mainstream. Death Note is known for having one of the most batshit insane premises, but also having absolutely stellar execution to back it up. The show all started with a crazy thought. What if we gave a genius teenager with a god complex the power of a god? And then we just allow him to fuck around and find out. What would he do? How would he go about it? You as the viewer have this morbid curiosity and want to see what kind of train crash this will turn into. This would be like the equivalent of giving one of those desperate clout chasers Messi's Instagram account. Like, you know for certain that this will probably turn out horribly, yet you still want to see how it plays out. And that morbid curiosity results in possibly the greatest 24 episode run in the history of anime. But everyone knows when it starts to go downhill. Episode 25. Now, you may not know this episode just from the number, and that's why we need to go back to 2018. As I'm sure everyone remembers, the entire world got sucked into a black hole. It was truly a sad event. People across the world mourned on that day, because for an entire 48 hours, nobody could play Fortnite. Does anyone else remember that event? Okay, alright, listen, just hear me out for a second. Playing Fortnite in 2018 was just like Death Note before episode 25. And then me staring at that black hole for hours on end was just like me watching Death Note after this episode. The Void was created after L died, of course. He proved to have too much presence in the show to just kill off. Everything that he was built to, all the mind games, his seemingly real friendship with Light, L was robbed. He should have reached the end of his character arc at the end of the show, but instead the show deletes the main opposing force halfway through the show and awkwardly tries to shove in new characters to fill that void. But it's too abrupt, and none of Nier and his lackeys carry a fraction of the intrigue that came from L and Light's rivalry. If episode 25 happened in a different way, then you'd see this show higher up than it already is.
It was then that Mob realized he failed to change as he had promised himself.
There is truly nothing like Mob Psycho 100. You can't truly fit this show into any single box. It combines masterful storytelling, genuinely captivating character arcs, fights that rival even some of the most hyped up shonen, and a message that will no doubt stick with you for a very, very long time. All into one single show that has seriously become one of my favorite anime of all time. But before any of that, we have to talk about Gym Bros. The Gym Bro is a very wide blanket archetype that is stereotyped all across media. And just generally speaking, their reputation is kinda terrible. They're usually portrayed as callous bullies in the worst case, but in the best case, they're as dense as a neutron star. But that always confused me a little, because since when was it a bad thing to dedicate time towards self-improvement? It was really a breath of fresh air to see a show where the meathead gym bros are actually just decent guys who have the simple goal of getting some muscles. And Mob is just an aspiring gym bro with the same goal: self-improvement and becoming someone he could be proud of. Well, that's not the full story. Mob is special. He's been gifted with practically omnipotent psychic abilities, but chooses to not use them. Why, you may ask? Because Mob doesn't see himself as special. Actually, quite the opposite. He's just a socially awkward middle schooler who has gone through stuff that I'm sure everyone has gone through at least once in their life. And that makes him surprisingly relatable. It's why I personally much prefer Mob Psycho over this author's other hit, One Punch Man, because it's so easy to find yourself in each and every character. Mob's anxiety and social awkwardness, Reigen's botched sense of self-worth, and Ritsu's inferiority complex with his brother. And then we look at One Punch Man, and yeah, it has a cool world and it's funny, but that actually brings me to my next point, because this show is actually funny. There's no gimmick or formula to it either. It genuinely might be one of my favorite comedy anime, despite offering so much more than just that. So let's talk about what else it offers. I mentioned the fights already, but bro, just look at this shit. Every night before I go to bed, I pray and give thanks for how good of an adaptation this anime got. They absolutely nailed the art style from the manga, and all the fights are just Chef's kiss. I know so many people that love this show for so many different reasons. Some are there solely for the fights, others are there for the laughs, and a lot of people just resonate with the characters. But me personally, I'm here for all of it. The king of shonen, the longest running, most successful serialized manga ever. One Piece. We finally made it, One Piece fans. The undisputed GOAT, the absolute pinnacle of storytelling. Being completely real for a second, it is my genuine belief that there is a valid argument to be made that One Piece is one of the greatest stories ever told. It's truly a special series. It has a sense of world building that is simply unmatched. Open world games could only dream to inspire the same sense of scale and childlike wonder when it comes to the world of One Piece. Whenever I watch this show, I feel like a kid again, but that's also not to discount any of the show's incredible characters and amazing writing on an arc-to-arc basis. This show has some straight bangers, from Water 7 to Marineford and Enies Lobby, and I'm currently on the 3rd act of Wano right now, and I'm loving it. One Piece has some of the highest highs in anime, but I think what a lot of people forget is that there are as many lows as there are highs. Look, there's a genuine argument to be made that One Piece is peak media, but notice how I phrased that sentence very intentionally. There's definitely an argument to be made, but I'd argue against you, because I want you, yes you, to look me in the eye and defend to me the fucking Fishman Island arc, where a major plot-defining event was Sanji sniffing a mermaid and getting a nosebleed of such legendary proportions that it incapacitates him for half of the arc. It's impossible to defend. How about the Davy Back fight, where I literally skipped because I thought it was filler, but had to go back and crawl through it because somehow it's canon. The only thing keeping me going was Luffy's afro. And then finally, there's just the entirety of the almost 50 episodes of Skypiea. And I'm in that camp of people which think it was just insufferable. One Piece has a lot to love, and I do love it a lot, believe me. I've been following this show for literally half of my entire life at this point, and I'll be the first online to suck Oda's cock, but One Piece is not the best anime. It's simply too flawed. For every Doflamingo this show has, there's a Hody Jones. To call yourself the best in an entire medium filled with such large and influential names, you have to be perfect. Or at least close to perfect. Medium well steak is the only way to eat steak. Steins Gate is good. These two statements are virtually the same, uncontroversial and correct. I don't really know what I can say about this classic that hasn't been said already. It's one of my personal favorite productions I've ever seen in anime. Some of the shots in this show just go hard. There's no other way to describe it. The last 12 episodes of this anime are the best 12 episodes in anime. Okay, maybe that's a stretch. X-Arm does exist. So Steins Gate is famous for being that one anime with the 3-episode rule just straight up does not work. You need way more context, way more time to get familiar with the cast of characters, and way more setup to prepare for the sheer roller coaster of the second half of this anime. Really, the only way I could describe Steins Gate is by comparing it to a ride at Disney World. Alright, hear me out for a second. Space Mountain easily solos every other coaster in that whole theme park, but that's besides the point. The entire branding of the ride is centered upon the fact that you can't really see anything. You're completely shrouded in darkness for its entire duration, and you can't even see the track ahead of you. The first part of the ride consists of movement, and you know it's moving, but you don't know in what direction, left or right, even up or down. It leaves you anxious until it drops you and you suddenly realize the direction you're going the entire time. Similarly, Steins Gate always has this layer of obscurity to its narrative. Even as the ride starts to accelerate, we're still left in the dark about a lot of things. That is, until the ride ends We get off, and we're able to see the show clearly for what it is. There are many things I absolutely love about this show. The intriguing mysteries that were brilliantly foreshadowed, how it somehow retains a cohesive plot while dealing with such a complex idea, and I know I already glazed it, but the entire production is just impeccable. And also, this is one of the rare shows that genuinely might be as fulfilling rewatching than watching it for the first time. It is inevitable that a disgusting amount of details will go unnoticed throughout your first watch, and going back and picking up on all of them is so satisfying. I won't actually go into the specifics of anything with this show because it's really easy to spoil, so just watch it. Every community has their canon event. Something that no matter who you were, if you were in this community, you experienced this traumatic thing one way or another. For gamers, it was the initial release of Cyberpunk 2077. For Marvel fans, it was Morbius. For League of Legends players, it was Shower. But for anime fans, I think the universal canon event that almost all of us can remember vividly is Berserk 2016. I'm sorry, did you hear that? That was the audible panic and dread washing over every single person who has experienced this sadistic turd. What I just did was like yelling "get down" to a group of traumatized veterans. It would be like mentioning the phrase job security to a computer science major. It would be like mentioning the dog scene to someone who's watched Full Metal Alchemist. Oh. So I'm sure this is gonna be a surprise to nobody, but Full Metal Alchemist is in my top 5. It's genuinely a show that I truly failed to find anything wrong with. It's like vanilla ice cream. You might not be the most original for liking it, but at the same time, nobody in good faith would genuinely go out of their way to hate on it, because it's just inarguably good. The story follows two brothers who live in a world where alchemy is possible. After their mother dies, they try to perform the ultimate taboo of alchemy: human transmutation. The transmutation backfires and the younger brother Al loses his entire body while the older brother Ed loses his left leg. And throughout the entire show, everything they do is to get their bodies back. They join the military and search relentlessly for the truth in order to restore their bodies. Although as they start to get closer and closer to the truth, the more incomprehensible their enemy becomes, where it gets to the point when they don't even know who they can trust anymore. Full Metal is really the full package. It has some of the best fights in the business that will guarantee to give you a boner. Yes, even if you're a woman. It's got such a vast cast of characters, which is wild to say because the show never forgets about any of them. Each character has their purpose. The show leaves every plotline to a satisfying conclusion, and that ending, I think this show got the best ending that it could have, which is weird being able to say that about an anime, because I feel like most anime nowadays either have endings that are solely made to insult the viewer for liking the show, or they just don't end at all. So yeah, that's my completely original take on this show. To everyone's complete shock, I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, that was number 5. 7 years ago, Made in Abyss Season 1 was released, and it lied to all of us. We were promised an adventure, one that we could all sit down, watch, and let ourselves be immersed in this mystical otherworldly descension into paradise. But the only thing waiting for them in this paradise was... To be completely forthright, I've never been more confused by a piece of media. What was the author trying to do? Is there actually a purpose behind showing all of these scenes that are just hard to watch? And most importantly, where the hell is this show going and what exactly is it trying to convey? My first thought was that it was all merely shock value, but
that didn't feel right at all. Something about these moments in the show as a whole doesn't feel cheap. These depictions feel less edgy and more raw. It's almost as if from the start, this story was trying to intentionally lure us into this false sense of security, showing us these beautiful landscapes, enchanting us with its mystical soundtrack, and introducing us to a cast of whimsical childlike characters was all a part of this deception. Once the veil was lifted though, we saw this show for what it truly was. But why did it end up taking this shape? Well, I wouldn't actually find the answer to that until today, because 7 years is a long time, so I don't really remember the show all too well. I went ahead and rewatched the entire show and took this opportunity to finally get around to watching the movie and season 2. And both of these were fucking traumatic. Made in Abyss is one of the most controversial anime ever, period. You either love it, hate it, don't want to remember it, or think everyone who watches it should be sent straight to hell because it's lolicon. The last one is very important, obviously. I hear this most often from people who've read the manga because it's apparently way worse there, but the anime for the most part is a faithful adaptation. And look, I won't defend it. Made in Abyss is a show I've never recommended to anyone, and it's something I probably never will. It's not lollybait in my opinion, but even if I were to give it the full benefit of the doubt, this show would have been way better if certain things just didn't happen or if certain panels just weren't drawn. Otherwise, this anime delivers one of the most potent storytelling experiences I've ever witnessed in an anime. Let me explain. Why is every layer of the abyss more and more terrifying, yet they're forced to keep descending anyways since they can't climb back up? Why are all the monsters in reality 20 times more horrifying than any book could have ever described? And why does every single child character we meet in this show always turn out to be tragically exploited and used in some way by the adults of the abyss? Well, let me use Santa Claus as an example. Trust me, this is going somewhere. Santa Claus is not real. The first time you've heard someone say this to your face, you were probably in shock, maybe a little bit in denial too. But more importantly, it felt like your whole understanding of the world just started crumbling, and what's left is this less magical, less perfect, less ideal image of the world that you're living in. This is probably the most common example of a loss of innocence. There's no going back, and each layer gets more and more real. This analogy, I think, can explain most of the events of Made in Abyss, and it kind of mirrors the audience's experience also. We have a loss of innocence when we realize that this isn't some silly little Pokemon adventure show. These characters are constantly getting beat down, constantly witnessing the horrors of the abyss, and constantly on the verge of death. Honestly, if you've only ever seen season 1 and you liked it, the movie and season 2 are truly what cemented this as a top 10 anime for me. Straight up.
For me personally, if I were to rank this 5 years ago without season 2, it'd be at least an entire tier below where it is right now. A lot of people hold season 1 on a pedestal for its great action and characters. And yes, I absolutely agree. Season 1 is a banger that had me gripped for its entire duration. But I think season 2 really transcends everything to come before it. Season 1 of Vinland Saga, which manga readers refer to as the prologue, felt like it had a little bit of an identity problem as a standalone. Thorfinn is out for revenge and it consumes his entire being, so much so that he literally dedicates his entire life to killing one man. And as a result of an action-packed plot like this and a 4-year break between seasons, so many people misunderstood the show. Even I was shocked at first when I initially went into season 2. It threw me off so much that I actually dropped the season after watching it weekly for a couple episodes. But eventually I came back to it after all the episodes came out, only because my brother was really into it. And I'm giving this background of me rediscovering season 2 to reject the notion that this is some slice of life slavery edition or some farming simulator or some corny Gandhi bullshit. I understand where these comments come from, but I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. I understand if this isn't your thing. Yes, it can be slow paced at times, and yes, it's 1000% an incredible departure from the action of season 1, but that's simply what Yukimura had to do to be able to accomplish the profound message he was always trying to convey from the start. And you know how people say the expression, it's not what they said, it's how they said it? I don't think anyone really thinks that nonviolence and pacifism is some revolutionary theme or concept to put into a story. It's just the way that the theme was subtly cultivated in the narrative from the beginning. Vinland Saga has one of my favorite main characters in anime and manga in general. His journey from beginning to end resonated with me in a way that I never would have expected. He objectifies so much negativity and hate and projects that hatred as his whole purpose in living. Then, when that object of hatred that he spent so much of his life with is ripped away from his grasp, his entire reason for living is stripped away too. So what now? Is the question that I think Yukimura answered with such brilliance that he inspired an entire vein of TikTok edits and compilations. On a complete side note, I absolutely adore how a large part of the community gave this series a shot and learned to accept it for what it is. I have no enemies. You don't either. Nobody does. Vinland Saga came out at just the right time. The reason this simple phrase spread across the internet like wildfire is because I think it's something a lot of people need to hear right now. It came to all of us when we needed it the most, and it spread its message at just the right moment.
We are no different from the ants. No, we are far worse.
In One Piece, Luffy is trying to find the One Piece. In Naruto, Naruto dreams of being Hokage. In Black Clover, Asta resolves to become the Wizard King. And on and on. Across the board, we see the most popular shonen shows to ever do it share this common theme of achieving impossible goals. And it's not hard to explain why. It's simply endearing seeing these larger-than-life characters chase after their larger-than-life dreams. And so Togashi looked at this trend and had a flash of inspiration. He would base his next hit new shonen series on a boy with the most insurmountable dream, to one day find his father. Damn, that's actually kind of sad. There are a lot of things that stand out with Hunter x Hunter compared to its peers, but I think it's fair to start with this. This is a huge cast of characters, and sometimes while you're watching Hunter x Hunter, you come to realize that you find yourself more invested with the stories of side characters than whatever Gon is doing at any point in time. And weirdly often, the climax of story arcs don't even concern Gon or the main cast at all. And when talking about shonen, it's impossible to overemphasize how much of a big deal this is. In Naruto, of course some storylines or character arcs play out without Naruto's involvement, but at the end of the day, it always traces back to him. Gon is just a minor player in the larger narrative that this show is building. And it's not hard to see why Togashi would do something like this. If you were to ask anyone who's watched the show which arc is their favorite, I'm sure they'd either say York New or the Chimera Ant arc, both of which spend so little time on Gon that he's almost practically reduced to a side character. This style of storytelling allows Togashi to not be chained by one perspective, and it grants him the ability to tell stories of a much more ambitious scale. But that's not why Hunter x Hunter is ranked number 2 on this list. It's only one out of 3 reasons. The second reason has to do with what enables all these side characters to be so interesting in their own right. Nen, which is my personal favorite power system ever. But to explain its brilliance, we have to take a look at My Hero Academia. Let's say, for instance, that the power system in My Hero Academia existed in real life, and everyone was given a random predetermined quirk. You get some useless ass superpower like, I don't know, the ability to manifest the number 2 pencil whenever you take a standardized test. And then your friend beside you gets some like cool shit, like the power to instantly spawn in the toilet with a bidet at any time. you will forever be pushed to the side while your friend becomes the main protagonist, because that power system is a victim to its own simplicity. You're born with a power and then you live with that power for the rest of your life. While with Nen, Togashi focused on making it malleable, a system that can account for desires, personalities, or conviction, and is so versatile that any one character can create a major impact with their Nen ability, even if they're not naturally gifted in Nen. It's so flexible and dynamic that I honestly wouldn't mind if it existed in the real world. Like, if it did, I restrict my powers to only work on like pedophiles, so I'd be like superpowered Batman for Minecraft YouTubers. The third reason is simply because of the Chimera Ant arc. This arc was the first to show me the true potential that shonen stories like this can have. Some One Piece arcs may come close, but the Chimera Ant arc is just absolute perfection. That's a lie. But let me explain myself first. The Chimera Ant arc is weird. The first 20 episodes or so are used as setup, and once we actually get to the action, most of the 40 episodes take place over the course of mere hours in the universe. And for 10 of those 40 episodes, it takes place over the course of mere seconds. And for all of this to make any sense, Togashi utilizes a narrator. I know a ton of people hate on this arc because of the narrator, and I don't love it either. But imagine for a second if the narration were to be removed. Every character decision would seem senseless and irrational, and there'd be remotely no stakes because the audience would have no idea what's going on. By slowing everything down to a crawl, Togashi is able to facilitate drama in an actual narrative into this incredibly ambitious idea that he had. And at the end, it all comes together, because to me, this stretch of 50 episodes contained the best character writing, the best fights, and the best payoff I've ever seen in an anime arc before. And I do suppose that it's personal preference, whether you mess with this extremely slow-paced, highly dramatized kind of storytelling, but to me it's peak fiction. The rest of the show is great too, of course. I just couldn't resist the urge to yap about the arc that my literal PFP on YouTube is from. But yeah, that's my take on the show. What do you think might be the correlation between a show's popularity and that same show's quality? Personally, I'd say it's pretty high, but others will point to shows like Sword Art or Demon Slayer and say that these shows are popular but not well written. Although, whenever you get into an argument with these guys, just remember that they have kryptonite. Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is the anime masterpiece of our generation. There are many people out there that have already analyzed, dissected, deconstructed, and reconstructed this anime better than I ever could have. So I just want to describe my experience. I'm sure that many of you, if you're a Gen Z baby like me, will resonate with what I'm talking about. Maybe more than the older or younger folks out there. But I don't know about any of you, but in 2013, I was concerned with two things: Naruto and the absolutely harrowing prospect that Santa Claus might not be real. But then there was Attack on Titan Season 1. It was something new, something I've never seen before, with a hook that could get even the most racist CSGO player to sit down and actually enjoy anime. And it wasn't just the hype behind its premise that carried this show to rank number 1 in popularity. This show had personality, memeability, and surprisingly good writing for a, quote, glorified zombie apocalypse show. This is a direct quote from my friend. Let's call him Nathan for now, but we'll get to him later, don't worry. The show got more seasons, more episodes, and with each one, the narrative got more complex, more layered. The story starts in a way that's so simple that anyone with a pulse can get behind it. It portrays the desperate struggle of humanity against these man-eating monstrosities known as Titans. But then, we're suddenly given revelations. Humans can turn into Titans now. The Armored and Colossal were human all along. The secrets of the royal family, and eventually the secrets of Aaron's basement. The show evolves into something that's anything but simple, and has a conflict with no clear solution. We're much less ignorant about the world now, and now because of that, we're much less certain in how we should progress. And in the meantime, while this show was evolving, I was there watching every step of the way, with its runtime practically eclipsing half my entire life on this earth. I look back on the simpler times of youth in 2013, where many of us were optimistic, ignorant gremlins that were just walled off from society. But once those walls came crashing down and we learned more, our perspectives on most things would take an abrupt turn. This show grew up with me. So when I call Attack on Titan a generational piece of fiction, I mean it literally. So this may be where you're listening to this and thinking to yourself, so this is just a nostalgia pick, isn't it? Well, Joshua, I'm glad you bring that up because I've reflected upon that a lot while putting this list together. And after 0.02 picoseconds, I came up with an answer to your concerns. Fuck no. This is episode 6 of Attack on Titan's second season, simply titled Warrior. It's an episode that, despite season 3 and 4 being as good as they are, still remains as my personal favorite. It's as close to a perfect 20 minutes of television that I've ever witnessed. Something I consider utterly flawless in build-up and execution. Essentially, the subject of this episode surrounds the extremely big reveal of Ymir. You see, Ymir is a human that can turn into a Titan, just like Eren. A development that came completely out of left field for every character to experience it. Well, actually, this happened in episode 5, but with a big reveal that introduces so many questions that it never got to answer, us as viewers going into episode 6 are still heavily preoccupied with this development. Yet, I'm sure that by now, almost 8 years after the episode aired, most of us know that this episode isn't about Ymir. But that's the entire point of this episode. Misdirection. Immediately we are given a clear and reasonably straightforward vision of what this episode is going to look like. The characters are discussing the implications and potential fatal ramifications of Ymir's transformation. But remember that all of this is tacked on with the second piece of game-changing news, that is Krista's true identity as Historia Rice. So with two fundamentally groundbreaking and drastic abrupt reveals occurring simultaneously, you'd expect the scouts to be shaken to their core, uncertain on how to progress or how to approach this mess. Yet there's no hint of anxiety or angst among any of them. They're completely calm. And that's where I think this episode starts to become uneasy. As the storm sets in and our favorite Marleyan couple enters the scene, the show seems so keen on keeping our focus off the duo, favoring Her Highness and her midget Titan love affair. But Eren then says something.
Two of you have been driven far enough away from your hometown as it is.
And it's as if something clicked within Reina. The normally quiet Bertolt suddenly becomes talkative, but he's making no sense.
Home! Let's go! We've been here long enough.
This is where we can truly start to analyze the absolute art that is this reveal and how it's handled. Instead of focusing on Eren's confusion to slowly build up the stakes, the show intentionally cuts away, leaving us wanting. It holds us in this awkward psychological liminal space because we know that something about that entire interaction felt wrong, but we're not given any time to think it over because the episode is pacing in a completely different direction altogether. An entirely new third mystery. But if trends follow, this will likely just be another distraction. It has to do with the fact that there is no breach in Wall Maria despite mass appearances of Titans within. It seems inconceivable, and the fact that something like this happens now after 5 years.
I'm the Armored Titan. He's the Colossal.
Reina casually drops the biggest reveal of the entire show, and then that's it. We just cut back to Hanji talking about Titan sex or something. I'm sure the first time you watch this, your immediate reaction was to rewind a little and make absolutely certain that he didn't just say what I think he just said, right? This is Isayama slapping you across the face, then pulling you back into the world of the living because this just happened. The absolute insanity to drop the categorically biggest reveal of the series so far with no build-up, no melodrama, and then to just cut away from it like it's nothing. You might be the most cheeky man on this planet, Isayama. For those that might not remember, the context of this episode that is shortly revealed is that the scouts knew that Bertolt and Reiner were likely the armored and colossal titans from before this episode took place. Pretty much everyone is forced to accept this possibility under overwhelming evidence, except Aaron, who's in disbelief about everything. Aaron points out that even if he is who he says he is, it'd make virtually no sense to reveal it right now. And then we get one of my favorite shots in the series, which accomplishes being a cool dynamic shot which exemplifies 3 distinct emotions between our 3 characters, but it also acts as a symbolic representation of the limbo that Reiner finds himself stuck between, a soldier and a warrior. Reiner proceeds to go on a brilliant meltdown that anyone with knowledge of Marley or beyond will appreciate, and the rest is history. It's a combination of expert directing on the anime side of things, writing that nobody else but Isayama can imitate, and straight up just perfect sound design, which creates this masterpiece of an episode. And this isn't the only one. There are easily 10 other episodes that I genuinely consider masterpieces of the show, most of which belong to our sacred Season 3 Part 2, which is something that anime fans will genuinely make you believe is the second coming of Christ. And notice how I used very specific language here, like make you believe. See, I was intentionally being deceptive here, because make no mistake, this is the second coming of Christ. And if that's true, then Season 4 is the third coming of Christ. But there was someone who didn't see it that way at all. Nathan. Remember him? All you need to know about Nathan is that he is a Dragon Ball fan, and that's it. That's his only exposure to the vast medium of anime. So me being the shepherd that guides the lamb, spreading the good word of God in anime on my college campus, made it my mission to convert this newborn fetus into an enlightened anime PFP on the internet. So I got him to sit down and watch his first real anime. It actually wasn't Attack on Titan though, it was Death Note. Sorry, sports fans. I couldn't convince him that Eren Yeager could solo Goku. But Light Yagami, on the other hand, yeah, he loved it. And then a gateway appeared to limitless opportunity. And at this point, I said something to Nathan that really didn't age well for either of us. You know, this might be my favorite anime. I'm jealous you get to experience it in full for the first time. But despite saying this, when I actually sat down and we got to watching, you can tell which one of us was seeing this for the first time. For anyone that might not fully get why I'm placing this show on such a high pedestal, let me ask you a question. Have you ever rewatched Attack on Titan? It's a question out of genuine curiosity, because if you didn't, that probably means you have life. Couldn't be me, I guess. But if you have rewatched this, then you know the other side of the Attack on Titan experience. How constantly, even if you knew every twist and curveball the show throws at you, you are still utterly bewildered by how perfectly it was executed and foreshadowed. How the rewatch forces you to actually view these early events of Season 1, not from the perspective of the main cast, but from a much more tragic point of view with the Marleyan trio. And finally, how you seriously get to appreciate just how thought out every single facet of the world and literally every story beat in the main plot was. Like, people think I'm joking when I say this, but there are literally multiple references to Season 4 in Episode 1. Like, genuinely, if you have free time on your hand, absolutely go for it. It's honestly scary how watching this show once is like half of the Attack on Titan experience. But you could do whatever you want. Agree or disagree, this is the video. I love anime, and this was my long-winded, bittersweet love letter to the medium. I've been watching anime for the better part of a decade, and this video is the culmination of all of that. I hope you guys can tell by its sheer length that I worked really hard to get this out to you guys. So if I were you in this situation, I'd honestly press that subscribe button. But who knows, maybe that's just me. I also have a Patreon. It's where I'll be posting the tier list, as well as any other stuff you guys might want to see. Patreon is a really big deal for me, because YouTube usually doesn't like when creators post once every fiscal quarter. So I'd really appreciate it if you're willing to check it out. This video was all just my personal opinion. It's not meant to be taken that seriously. I just hope that if you went into this, you went to it with an open mind, maybe got a few recommendations out of it. That's really my only hope for these videos. I hope you guys have a good one. See you all in the next one.